call the Saline City Council Meeting to order. If you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You're going to have to bear with me this evening, friends. I'm suffering from a little bit of a migraine, but hopefully we'll get through this. Present this evening are myself, Mayor Morrow, Council Members Gearbaugh, Cybo Koenig, Rhodes, Roth, and Tahar. I have not heard from Mr. Burgoyne, and you have not either. It's okay. So we'll actually dispense with a motion to excuse and see if he gets here this evening. Absent is City Manager Campbell. From staff, we have City Clerk Royal, Treasurer Bennett, Police Chief Rennick, DPW Director Fordyce, City Superintendent Engineer Rubel, Technology Support Coordinator Schonk. Is he here this evening? Oh, okay, great, Chris, thank you. And Business Ambassador Korfman. Others present, if you'd please sign in the back, we would appreciate that. At this time, I would seek a motion to approve the agenda as submitted, unless there are amendments. I do have a couple things to note. Ms. Tahar passed out a, actually it looks like 3 or 4 memorandums that I think she'll be...
Yes, it's the State Transportation Commission policy on complete streets.
Okay.
It's just one item, but several pages.
Okay, and you'll be talking about that during the discussion portion of the agenda?
During the discussion, yes.
Excellent. There's a letter dated today, actually, September 15th, from Mitch Rhodes at Quantum Signal. There are 2 supplementals provided by Mr. Roth, and then also a third, which I think, does this relate to the Cable Commission?
Yes, and that's as far as commission reports.
Very good. Okay. So just all sort of things for your review, and again, they'll be referenced when we get to those portions or those items on the agenda. Excuse me. At this time, I would seek a motion again to approve the agenda as submitted, unless there are amendments.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Cybo Koenig. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion is approved as submitted. We have no presentations this evening, so we'll move on to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested, but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items? No? Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Mayor, I'd like to remove 184 and 185.
Okay, so that will go, looks like they'll be sandwiched into new business, Mr. Gearbaugh.
Thank you.
184 and 185. So they'll follow 14-179 and precede 14-187. So, please note that Mr. Gearbaugh has struck 2 of the resolutions from the agenda, or the consent agenda this evening for discussion. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh, seconded by Councilmember Roth. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We have one new business item this evening, item 14-182. This is CBI Telecom. This is a series of 2 motions. The first motion will be to acknowledge receipt of the September 2nd, 2014 memo from Technology Support Coordinator Schonk and to approve or not to approve the recommendations for Verizon Wireless account, the Frontier Wireline and T1 lines, and to authorize or not authorize the payment in the amount of $6,582.42 to CBI Telecom.
Move to approve and authorize.
Thank you, Councilmember Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Mr. Schonk, sir, would you care to address this issue again?
Sure. So to piggyback on the conversation we had last week about the new contract renewals and given kind of the problems we had over the previous weekend, we have met with Frontier staff. I met with William Sharp. He's our rep for the area. He kind of went to a kind of more thorough kind of explanation of what happened, and really it goes down to the storm it not only hit DTE hard, it also hit Frontier extremely hard. So they were very apologetic, very willing to work with us in the future. We discussed a backup line, which they're very confident they could give us an alternative circuit that would not be on our current circuit. So we're going to investigate that and look at getting a backup that way. They also expressed that they now have fiber optic cable in the area, so that's even more reliable than the current copper that we use. So we're also going to investigate that. So we're going to look at some alternatives to kind of not only supply backup to the building, but also hopefully more reliable technology in general. So, given kind of the time constraints, that meeting was Friday. The current motion, the second part, I'd just like to strike the 36-month agreement. So we'll just go with the 24-month, if that's okay. And then we'll just kind of put that on hold for right now until we get more firm numbers and things from Frontier directly.
So just to be clear, are you suggesting that we not approve motion B? Or are you just saying that we should amend it and strike 36 months and change it to 24?
Correct.
Okay.
So, sorry. So there's actually two there. So the first one is a 24-month agreement with AT&T, which I'd like to move ahead with.
Okay.
The second part is the 36-month agreement with Frontier that I'd like to just not go forward with at this time.
Okay. So, apologize for the confusion.
No problem. Sorry about
Are there additional questions for our technology support coordinator? Ms. Tahar and then Mr. Rhodes?
So the potential backup line would involve additional cost to us as well?
It would, yes. And I don't know those numbers yet, but
Okay.
there would be an additional cost.
So that's why you're suggesting we not approve the agreement with Frontier?
Correct. Yeah. Right. The number. Yeah. It's going to change. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rhodes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I had the same question
Oh.
that Mayor Pro Tem had, so that's fine.
Additional questions? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sean.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any additional discussion? No, then it's been properly moved by Rhodes, seconded by Tahar to approve and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. The subsequent motion, as it reads, is to approve or not to approve the 24-month agreement with AT&T and the 36-month agreement with Frontier, and to authorize or not authorize the payment in the amount of $7,801.84 to CBI Telecom.
Move to amend motion Part B of that motion, and I would move to approve the 24-month agreement with AT&T and to authorize the payment in the amount of $7,801.84 to CBI Telecom.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second as amended, yes.
Second as amended by Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there any discussion?
I have some.
Please, Mr. Roth.
Now, this amount of money that was put there, is that for 1 year or is that for the 36 months?
So that amount will go down. Correct. That is for the 36-month agreement.
So you don't know what the 24-month amount is?
Right. Correct.
Therefore,
Whatever.
Therefore, we need to have that motion changed.
Okay. We can do that.
Well, we need to do that.
Okay.
But you don't have a specific number?
I don't have
for
an
us?
amount yet, so yeah, if you want to, we can come back with the whole thing when I have you. I don't know. It's kind of right now. Frontier's working on that number, so I don't have it currently.
What's your pleasure? Mr. Rhodes is the mover. How would you,
I didn't know that.
I think I would withdraw my motion, and we'll wait for it to come back to us at some
a
point.
specific amount?
Sure.
Mr. Gearbaugh, you comfortable
Is there anything
with-
yeah, I'm comfortable with that, but is there anything time sensitive with getting this portion?
The AT&T contract's at the end of the year, so we do have a little bit of time on it
Oh,
to
okay.
get it done. Yeah, so there's no
Sorry.
rush on that.
Yep.
And you're comfortable with that too, Mr. Roth?
Oh, yes, I'd say, it just didn't, I wasn't be sure of their
Sure.
number.
No, good question. Okay. So Mr. Rhodes has retracted his motion. Mr. Gearbaugh has withdrawn his second. So that motion dies, and you'll come back when we have a specific number from CBI Telecom.
Yes.
Very good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's nothing further on this this particular item, we'll proceed to new business. The first new business item is 14-179. This is community event, Epic Race Triathlon. This will be a motion to acknowledge the September 2nd email from Police Chief Rennick and the September 3rd email from DPW Director Fordyce, and to approve or not to approve the community event request from Epic Race to hold a portion of the triathlon within the city limits on October 5th, 2014, with police officers stationed at both Industrial and Campus Drive and Industrial and Woodland Drive, and that the total cost for police service and DPW service of $612.72 be paid by cashier's check on or before September 29th, 2014. Is there a motion?
I would move to approve.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Councilwoman Seibel Koenig. We probably have multiple people who could speak about this. I know the applicant, Christina Scheibele, is here. Do you care to comment at all? And Police Chief Rennick, or DPW Director Fordyce, if you'd like to come forward, if you have a comment as well, we'd appreciate that. But Christine, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you for being here this evening.
The Hornet Triathlon is a fundraiser that we put together to raise money for some sites around Saline that don't have defibrillators. AEDs. So we put this together. This portion is just the bike that'll be using these roads. So right now, we have about 100 people registered for the race. It's on October 5th. We'll have a lot of signing up at the end. You know, a lot of people wait till they see the weather forecast to sign up. So there's a kids triathlon and an adults triathlon. It'll start at 7:45 on a Sunday morning, and we'll be wrapped up and done by about 11.
Chief Reddick, do you have any comments?
We had a meeting with them, and Pittsfield is going, I believe, is going to approve the race as well. The majority of it is in Pittsfield.
Yeah.
Starts at the high school, goes through Pittsfield, but only a short portion goes through the city. And after discussing it with the applicant, they were in full agreement that they would pay the fees up front, and if in fact the police department could do it for less, they would then be refunded the amount that were the actual costs.
Yep.
Very good. Are there questions for the applicant or Chief Reddick? No? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Additional discussion? No, that's been properly moved by Rhodes, seconded by Councilwoman Cybo Koenig to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We now move on to two items that were added to the new business portion of our agenda this evening. The first is a resolution to come off of the consent agenda. It's item C-14-184. This will be a motion to approve and adopt Mayor Marl's proclamation of October 2014 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the city of Saline.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Burgoyne. Mr. Gearbaugh, do you want to speak to this since you requested it be added to the added as a new business item?
Yeah, I just felt that, often we put these on the consent agenda, and these items are extremely important, especially bringing about the awareness of domestic violence and including the national bullying activities. These items, as we've seen in the news lately, and what occurs is just something that we need to continue to promote and make awareness out there so that we do realize that a lot of our phone calls and things that our police department receives are domestic abuse cases and issues, and whatever we can do and provide for services and make awareness for individuals that does occur. And I appreciate the mayor for putting these forward, but I just wanted to bring that up and make sure that we promote that as a part of our broadcast.
Very good. Excellent. Appreciate your remarks, Mr. Gearbaugh. Are there additional comments? No, that's been properly moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Burgoyne to approve and adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. And we move on now to C-14-185. This will be a motion to approve and adopt Mayor Marl's proclamation of October 2014 as National Bullying Prevention Month in the city of Saline.
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, to approve, I'm assuming?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And Mr. Burgoyne, you seconded to approve and adopt? Thank you. Discussion? Mr. Gearbaugh, do you want to comment on this one as well?
Same thing. With bullying, the issues concerned with that is really the individual children or even children or older young adults that are committing suicide as a result of feeling intimidated or feeling bullied at school and such. We cannot continue to lose young lives to this purpose. And so promoting this again is an issue that I feel strongly about, and we should, as a community, make sure that this is occurring. And whoever needs to find help or assistance, contact our police or any members of the council or any members of the social services areas that within the city that we would prefer that to help you out and prevent this from happening again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Any subsequent discussion? No? It's been properly moved by Tahar, seconded by Councilmember Burgoyne to approve and adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on now to new business item 14-187. This is target market analysis. This will be a motion, to acknowledge receipt of the September 9th, 2014 memo from Business Ambassador Korfman and to approve or not to approve the resolution in support of partnering with the City of Ypsilanti, the City of Chelsea, and the Village of Dexter in conducting a target market analysis study for each of the 4 communities at a not-to-exceed amount of $8,000.
Moved. Go ahead.
Move to approve.
All right, well, let
Support.
Tahar be the mover to approve and Councilmember Rhodes to be the second. Ms. Korfman, you talked about this rather extensively last week. Do you care to make any additional comment this evening?
I just want to make a couple additional comments. As part of the report that we would receive for the downtown and the community, we would also request that we receive an analysis for properties located at 600 Maple and 207 Monroe, and that would be at no additional cost. We are requesting a grant application for up to 50% of the cost. So the $8,000 estimated fee would actually, if we got the grant, would only be $4,000. Of that, $3,040 would be contributed from TIFA and $960 from the general fund. We did find out that as part of the target market analysis RFP, the city would have to have a project started on at least one of the properties within 3 years of the grant being awarded, which doesn't mean that the project has to be completed or the ground broken. We can fulfill this requirement simply by securing a developer or having a developer be in the process of having their site plan approved. If we do not have a project within the 3-year time frame, there's a possibility the grant will have to be paid back. And also I wanted to note that MISTA has pre-approved 2 vendors based on their qualifications. The Land Use USA, Sharon Woods was here last week from that vendor, and then Zimmerman Volk from Indiana. Our RFP request can only be sent to one of the, we'll send it to both vendors, but we can only choose one of those vendors. If we choose outside of those 2 vendors, then MISTA won't accept the grant application. And I have Michelle here from this Village of Dexter. She's been spearheading this effort, so we can answer any questions that council may have.
Michelle, we appreciate you being here this evening.
Thank you for the invitation.
What questions does council have? Mr. Rhodes, and then we'll follow by Mr. Roth.
2 questions. One is the requirement to have a development started within that 3-year time period. Is that anywhere within our downtown and not just the vacant properties?
It has to do with any of the sites that you will have studied as part of this grant application.
So it could be an existing structure, existing building, and something happens with that. Okay, and then the other thing was, the question was whether or not there's anything we can do to improve the chances of MISTA granting that, because I'd like the 4,000 a lot better than I do the 8.
I have had personal conversations with Jim Tischler, who runs this particular division of MISTA, and the primary factor that MISTA is going to be using, although he can't tell me 100%, but 99.9%, as long as we had 2 or more communities as part of the application, then MISTA can get behind it. When you heard from Ms. Sharon last time, I'm sure she explained to you that the TMA starts at a bigger regional level, in this case the county. They've already got a project that they're working on for Washtenaw County. So a lot of that data, that poll data is already there. So basically what this grant will consist of is drilling down to the individual communities that are looking to participate and getting that information needed to help them with the redevelopment of the sites in their different communities.
And have the other communities that are listed here already agreed?
Yes.
So if we do adopt it tonight, then that's 4 communities. That's twice the minimum of 2, so double 99.9, we're in good shape.
I think we're in really good shape.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Mr. Roth?
I have several questions for Michelle. Number 1, you're from Dexter. What position do you have, and why did you suggest, I think you just answered, why did you come to Saline and ask us to be a part of it?
I am the community development manager for the Village of Dexter, so I do all the planning, the zoning, the economic development. I handle the Downtown Development Authority, and when I have time, I do code enforcement. So, you may know that the village has some prime available properties that the village owns itself and that are privately owned. And they front right onto Mill Creek Park, the park that was done just about a year ago, which also fronts right onto Mill Creek, which dumps into the Huron River. It's a beautiful vista. It's a great park, great accessibility. We'd like to get those sites redeveloped. It's part of a 30-year plan that the village has had, to take the existing industrial that was part of the old village out of the village, get it into the industrial park, and redevelop those areas for an expansion of the downtown. We know that the market trends at least nationally, are that people are looking for a more urban lifestyle, whether that's Detroit, Ann Arbor, or little communities like Village of Dexter, Saline, Chelsea, and even the city of Ypsilanti. But what we don't know, what none of us know right now is who's that cohort that's going to come in? Are they going to buy? Do they want to rent? And if so, what's it going to cost to construct? And what can that developer expect back in rent or a sale? Those are questions I can't answer with national market data. That's something you here in Saline can't answer either. I don't think so, at least. Even very good real estate brokers are going to tell you the same thing. It's just, we just don't have that information. And we're going forward doing plans to, our master plans, our sub-area plans. We know what we'd like to see. That's part of the planning process. The targeted market analysis allows us to have a little bit more reality in that process.
The second part of my question, as far as why did you come to Saline? Can I make the assumption that you did it because you needed a larger geographic area, or you just felt that you needed us to be joined? Because I look at it as far as you have a good purpose for changing industrial to residential as being part of your city. That same scenario doesn't work here in Saline. I also look at far as when you broaden the base, we're all going to be competing for Mr. Monies later on. Why did you ask for competitors to share the cost?
Because although we seem like competitors, we each offer something unique to that market, those cohorts that we're trying to bring to the communities. The one thing that we all have in common is we all have a downtown, but they're all various sizes. The other common entity is we are all communities outside of Ann Arbor. We know that Ann Arbor is a huge draw. A lot of people want to live there. That one we don't necessarily need data on. You can see what they're building. But not everybody can afford to live in Ann Arbor. They may want to, but they can't afford to live there. Dexter, Saline, Ypsilanti, and Chelsea offer viable alternatives. Each has something unique to offer the marketplace. So while the grant opportunity requires multiple communities to participate, I don't look at it, and the Village of Dexter doesn't look at it as competition. It looks at it as a way to strengthen the marketplace overall in this area, part of Washtenaw County. It helps to provide that captive audience, if you will, for your downtown, for the businesses that are downtown, people living there, they're shopping there. They're checking out the places that are right there where they live. The other thing, and this is one of the things that the Village of Dexter looks at, I'm sure you probably have too, as well as Ypsilanti and Chelsea. We know that there is talent gaps out there for the businesses that aren't necessarily in our downtown, but are outside of our downtown, whether it's an industrial park, a business park. In our case, it's our research park. We want to make sure as we go forward offering housing opportunities or residential opportunities in our downtown that we are targeting those future talent pools that we're going to need for our businesses, current and in the future. That's another consistency with the 4 different communities. I hope that's answered your question.
Well, you did very well on those, but I have some more with it. I question the financial opportunities or investment where you're asking us to make. Far as whether it be $4,000, $8,000, or even be $1,000. I question far as we're hedging a lot of things. Number one, we're hedging on whether we'll get the first grant from MISTA. So it comes, will we get it or not get it? So we're hedging that bet. Down later on, far as we're hedging, far as where we're ever going to get our money coming back, it'll have to be from tax or from our taxes that we charge from what was been developed. So that's going to be a long road, long ways down for us to do such. I look at far as with budgets and money being tight, I'd rather see the money spent on roads and sidewalks instead of downtown. And as far as looking we would have better spent our money, we get immediate use from our money if we improved sidewalks. So I kind of look for as what is wisest for us to spend the money on. And also far as the one who gets the money later on would be the developer or the property owner if they apply for grants from MISTA later on when they actually develop the property. So if we go through with this particular study, I was given the reasoning for doing it, they then are eligible for applying for MISTA grant. Is that an initial requirement for all MISTA grants that you comply with their studies?
I'm not sure exactly the question you're asking.
Well, number one, you're asking us to join in and spend, let's just call it $4,000 for our part of the study. Study, and that's if we get the grant. If we don't get the grant, it's going to be more. That's the given. What we get out of it is a potential that some developer or some buyer or the property owner is going to be able to sell that property. It's going to have an increased value on our tax base.
Yeah.
And that's going to be over time. And we're going to need to take a hedge on it far as, are we going to ever regain our money back that we put in for hedging this? And also far as, I was told that if we don't comply, it's a chance that the developer would not get a MISTA grant because we weren't involved with this study. I don't like having that put over our head by MISTA, that we have to complete this study. So in the future, a developer can do such. I don't think it's the wise use of our money.
The 3-year window to get a project started is, in my understanding, MISTA's way of being fiscally responsible with grant dollars. They're making an investment in your community. They're asking that the communities that participate get a project going. So that's the return on investment for MISTA. The return on investment for the community is the increased tax base, not just by the development of that piece of land, but then the spin-off that comes from that. People shopping in your shops, businesses opening. Yes, this is a long-term process. It's not an overnight turnaround. I cannot qualify or quantify a number for you. For Saline, I can't quantify a number for the village of Dexter at this point. We are, the incentive, one of the other incentives, and you touched on it, is it provides the developer with an opportunity perhaps later on for grant dollars. You are in the pipeline for more MISTA grant dollars. It's the carrot and stick approach.
But we don't, there's so many unknowns with this. What would be known, we're going to spend about $4,000 hedging for something that may work to our advantage in the future. We don't know when that's even going to be, how much of a return we're going to get with it, but we are always going to go with the hypothetical thing. It's going to help our downtown. We've thrown so much money for going to help our downtown, and our sidewalks need work. I think it's time, it's disproportionate amount of money that the taxes that's paid by the property owners downtown versus what's paid by the rest of the residents in the community. I think it'd be wiser to put it to a better use than what we are. I question even if the $3,040 is in the TIFA budget. When the thing comes across our desk, all we do is approve a mass budget. Now we're seeing an item coming out of that budget. Did the TIFA board approve such a thing, spending? I don't have any documentation of such. And even the $960 out of a general budget could be used, definitely set aside for sidewalks or carry over for better use. I would hope my council colleagues would keep some of the same thoughts in mind when they're making a vote for this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Mr. Gearbaugh, did you have a comment, sir?
Yeah, just a couple questions. When you mentioned the 3-year period, so if we do this study at this point, so we only have a 3-year window in which to apply for aid?
No.
So this would be...
This is just, once they pay out the grant, because
Right.
it'll be a reimbursable, you get reimbursed for the expenditure that you
Right,
make.
right.
That's the time, that's when the clock starts ticking, that's my understanding. You have 3 years for the project to then get started.
Within that 3-year period. That's why I just want to see what kind of time frame we had.
The other thing to keep in mind, as with any regulation, there's always a process for requesting additional time. This particular grant is not an exception to that.
Right.
You're going to be given an opportunity to say, hey, it's this far down the road, or there's these things that happen, so you'd have that opportunity to get yourself a little cushion.
Right, we've done that previously, kind of like a no-cost time extension, whatever. The other question I had, so in terms of, say a developer does come forward, are there any kind of restrictions on the type of funding, and are there any expectations from MISTA as to what type of projects they're expecting us to fund, or is it open?
To my understanding, there's no restrictions. If you're going to go for pots of money through MISTA, there may be restrictions on that as far as the types of development, because MISTA is a housing authority.
Right.
But there's no restriction on your grant that requires them only to go X, Y, or Z direction.
Okay. My concern with that was trying to make sure there wasn't specific type grants that they were looking for, the funding in this type of application where it was limited to certain types of, home or low-cost housing or something like
Yeah,
that,
definitely.
but if it was larger than that. The other part, I know there's this concern where we're talking about it basically does look like pay to play, but I think what they're doing is, the intent is, like as you have said, we're trying to find a way to spend the dollars, and they want to know which communities are really wanting to participate and to share and cost share in this function going forward. And so $4,000, and I agree we have other expenditures, but we do have, I believe, a line for professional services in our TIFA budget that is approximately $5,000 or $10,000 a year. So that is subject for these type of things. So the money is there. I wouldn't have recommended this last week had we not had that sufficient funding for that. The other question, and I would like to, Mr. Roth had mentioned that we don't have industrial area. We do have industrial area. We have a former factory that's a large building downtown, and this whole area is in that. And so as we look at potential redevelopment, we have many areas of which downtown could benefit from this kind of thing and significantly increase their tax base, for which we would offset a lot of the residential pieces, which unfortunately we're starting to lose out because of our industrial decrease and such. The only other question I had is, does Dexter actually have any plan in place where this is just another step in which you've already got something in the back burner and you're ready to move it forward, or are you at the same level where we are, is we got people that are interested but they just haven't moved forward yet?
Right. Yes. To answer your question, a short answer, yes. We're in the same position you are. We may be in various stages of that planning process, but yes, we have developers that are interested, but they're not sure. They know what the Ann Arbor market is, but they don't know what the market is for Dexter. They don't necessarily know what it is for Saline, for Chelsea, or for even the city of Ypsilanti. This missing middle, as they call it, this housing for, whether it's the baby boomers, the millennials, the empty nesters, we don't have the information to be able to provide to a group of developers, or even one developer, to say, this is what we're seeing, this is the information, it's grounded in a scientific method for determining. We don't have that information yet.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
we are just like you.
That's my answers. Thank you.
Is that it, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Thanks. Yes, could you describe in a little more detail how you would anticipate using the study results in Dexter? Would you be actively using it to recruit developers? Would you leave it to the realtors? How do you plan to use the results?
We plan to use it with both the development community as well as the real estate community, because they're going to have to work hand in hand. But our goal is to bring this information together so that we can go out for a request for proposals from developers, because, like I said, the property, part of it is owned by the village, some of it is owned by private entities. But the parcels that are owned by the village, we would like to entertain, not options, but proposals from developers who could come in and provide us with the product that will work in the market at a price that will work in the market, and will provide the density that we're looking for in our downtown. We have a wonderful little downtown. You are all familiar with it. You have a wonderful downtown, a little bit larger than what we have. But we all struggle with the same thing. We struggle with being able to have the feet on the ground at the pedestrian level to be able to support the businesses that are in our community. We can't have living museums in our downtown. These are people making a living. We have to do something to provide that constant stream of foot traffic to make these businesses successful and viable.
Please.
And have you spoken with realtors as well about how they might use it?
Yeah, we have spoken with some of the realtors, more of the brokers, Swisher and Colliers. We haven't gone too much, we haven't had a lot of discussion with the residential home realtors, but both, and we just recently held a presentation. We're in the Redevelopment Ready Communities program through the MEDC. We had a presentation on what they call their redevelopment sites. It's an option, it's a free option that's offered through University of Michigan with Professor Allen and his students. They come in, they study a site. They did a preliminary presentation just a couple weeks ago, and we had over 30 people come, 2 different developers and a number of different real estate professionals. Everybody wants to know about how these sites can be developed and what's the information on the missing market. They are ready to pull the trigger. They just need to have a little confidence, and the TMA is what will give a little bit more confidence.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Burgoyne?
In the document, the target area is left blank. And so I'm wondering, just from the Saline point of view, would our target area be our standard downtown plus the Monroe Street property plus the other property on Maple? Is that what we're thinking of for our target area? I'm wondering more about us rather than overall.
Yeah, we're looking at the downtown plus those 2 other properties. The 147 property would be in the downtown, and then we would put in those other 2 parcels as well.
But it would be our total standard downtown, the area that we have targeted as our downtown target,
That's correct.
plus those 2.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Any additional questions? No? Oh, Mr. Roth?
I do want to comment. I want to thank you for your efforts and what you're going through in order to work for this particular grant, especially for your city, your village. I want to thank you for that, and thank you for answering our questions.
Thank you. You had very, very good questions.
Your presentation was very helpful, and we appreciate your time this evening, Michelle. Thank you so much. Kathy, thank you. Is there anything further? If there's no subsequent discussion, we'll proceed to vote then. It was properly moved by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, seconded by Councilmember Rhodes to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay?
The ayes have it. The motion carries. We move on to new business item 14-188. And I should note, you're going to be abstaining from this motion and the subsequent one?
Yes.
Okay. So if you'd note that Councilwoman Seibel Koenig will be abstaining from voting on item 14-188 and 14-189. So the first motion is tree lighting. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the application for community event / use of public ways from Saline Area Chamber of Commerce for their annual tree lighting ceremony. To acknowledge receipt of the September 9th, 2014 memo from Public Works Director Fordyce, the September 9th, 2014 memo from Police Chief Rennick, and to approve or not to approve the holiday tree lighting ceremony to take place on Friday, December 5th, 2014 at 7 p.m. with approval to close the left turn lane on North Ann Arbor Street, the closing of North Ann Arbor Street from Michigan Ave to the entryway of parking lot 1, and the MDOT permit for closing the left turn lane on Michigan Ave. And 1, that the traffic engineer issue the required temporary traffic control orders. 2, that the required permit be obtained from MDOT, for closing the turn lane on Michigan Ave. 3, that the Chamber of Commerce provide a certificate of insurance with the city named as an endorsed additional insured party for the event.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Gearbaugh. We have the Executive Director and President of the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce here. Do either of you wish to make a comment this evening?
We'll talk about it when we come up for the next one.
Okay, very good. Are there any questions for the applicant? Or staff, excuse me,
Well,
Mr.
I
Roth.
have a question. In our memo support material for it, it lists about cost. And in the motion doesn't say anything about waiving cost. Was that omitted or not?
It's in the next one. It's in with the next one.
Okay.
Any additional discussion? No? Then it's been properly moved by Councilmember Burgoyne, seconded by Gearbaugh to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to, well, with one abstention, excuse me. We move on to new business item 14-189. This is the Christmas parade. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the application for community event / use of public ways from the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce for the annual holiday parade, to acknowledge receipt of the September 9th, 2014 memo from Public Works Director Fordyce, the September 9th, 2014 memo from Police Chief Rennick, and to approve or not to approve the 2014 Christmas parade to be held on December 6, 2014 in downtown Saline, and to authorize or not authorize the use of parking lots number 1, the closing of Michigan Avenue, North and South Davenport Street, West McKay Street, North Lewis, as well as the use of 3 parking spaces downtown and the MDOT permit for the closing of Michigan Ave. No parking along Michigan Ave from Hall Road to Lewis Street from 4 p.m. until Michigan Ave is reopened after the parade, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, that the traffic engineer issue the required traffic control orders for street closing and use of parade route. 2, that the required permit for the closing of Michigan Ave be obtained from MDOT. 3, that the Chamber of Commerce provide a certificate of liability insurance with the City of Saline as an endorsed additional insured party. And 4, that the fees for police and DPW service, which are over and above the normal operating costs estimated at $2,032, overtime fees, be waived.
Motion to approve and to authorize.
Thank you, Councilmember Burgoyne. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Would our applicants like to come forward and talk about one of our signature events in town? Oh, you're already festive. God bless you.
First of all, thank you very much. It's only 81 days till the tree lighting, 82 days to the parade, but things have a way of happening very fast. Our timeline starts on September 1st, and we're well into it as we approach this date here. The parade, I don't have a lot of particulars on it. We have had a lot of our units that we've had in the past have already agreed to come back, and so we're looking forward to that. The tree lighting ceremony is all volunteers, so that there's really no cost to the city for doing this. And I can't really do anything about the volunteers for the parade as far as closing down the streets. It just has to be done if we're going to have a parade. So anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions for Mr. Trapp? Mr. Rhodes?
Just had one question. The motion includes the use of parking lot number 1. I'm just wondering what that's going to be used for?
Staging?
Number 1, okay.
Yeah, we'll have some staging back there. We'll open it up just as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions, Mr. Tahar?
Yeah, just a comment. I've had several people ask me what is the theme of the parade, and since it's not mentioned in the actual motion, perhaps you'd like to disclose the theme.
All your favorite Christmas memories.
Thank you.
Which can be anything. I mean, it's as broad as it can be. So we had a Charlie Brown theme last year, and we had more Charlie Brown things than we really cared to. So we tried to make it as broad as we possibly could for this year. It should also be noted that the parade is officially being noted in the future and also this year as the Saline Christmas Parade. It's no longer the holiday parade or whatever. So that was done through the Chamber Board in a very, I don't want to say contentious, but a very spirited discussion to have the name as one versus having, I tried to have it as the holiday Christmas parade, and that didn't work. So it will be known from now on as the Saline Christmas Parade.
Thank you, Mr. Trapp. Are there any additional questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate
I get to wear it again one more time.
Thanks, Shelley. If there's no subsequent discussion, it's been properly moved by Councilmember Burgoyne, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar to approve and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries with 6 in favor and 1 abstention. We move on to new business item 14-190. This is archaeological license agreement. This will be a motion to acknowledge the receipt of the September 10th, 2014 memo from Saline City Manager Campbell and to approve or not to approve the archaeological license agreement between the City of Saline and the Saline Area Historic Society as presented.
Move to acknowledge receipt of memo.
You want to start with that, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yeah, just because.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Burgoyne. Okay. Yeah, do you want to actually start with your presentation, Mr. Peters? Okay. Get out of your way here. We'll let Mr. Peters and his guest do the presentation, then we'll open it up for questions.
Well, good evening. My name is Jim Peters, and I'm with the Saline Area Historic Society tonight. And with us, we have our guest speaker, Mrs. David Jebb, who is a professional archaeologist. And I'll tell you a little more about David in just a minute. But this evening, the Historic Society is seeking permission from City Council to conduct an archaeological survey at Salt Springs Park and to approve the license agreement to do so for the purpose of better understanding our local heritage. This will be an all-volunteer effort with no cost or risk to the city. David's prepared a very nice presentation for us tonight on how to conduct these surveys, and she asked me to say a few words about why we should conduct this survey. I think to that note, I think we'd all agree that our parks have a business component to them. One of their functions is to attract families and businesses by improving the quality of life in our communities. And because the Salt Springs area has attracted human activity over 10,000 years, we feel this park will offer a great deal of historic, educational, and possibly even tourism to Saline. We already know quite a bit about the Salt Springs from research done by others, but we believe there's a lot more down there to find out, and the best way to find that additional information is to go looking for it. That's what David's going to help us with. Now, David has quite a robust resume. She has a master's degree in archaeology. She received her bachelor's at a university in Wisconsin, is it Beloit? Beloit. Studied in Germany, where she received her master's. Graduated magna cum laude from both universities. Attended San Diego State, California State, San Marcos and Palomar State. She's conducted surveys and digs in North Africa and the Middle East. She speaks 4 languages fluently: French, German, Arabic, and of course German. So she's quite the archaeologist. She's also a resident of Saline. If we went through all the points of her resume, we'd be here another 20 minutes. But since we have a nice presentation, I will turn the floor over to Dave.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me here. I think everyone here knows the historic and prehistoric importance of the area, but I just wanted to quell any potential fears you guys might have concerning what we would be doing archaeologically, from an archaeological standpoint, specifically the surveying and then potentially later the excavations. So tonight I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be addressing specifically Exhibit B in the archaeological license agreement, and that's, I believe, page 4 and 5, on your handout. And so I'm going to first talk about what surveying entails and just let you know there's going to be no bulldozers or anything highly invasive. I'm going to just break down what we do as archaeologists when we survey. And then after, if we do find anything, how we document, collect, and process those finds. And later, if we do decide to do full excavations, what that will entail. And at the end, I'll take your questions. So first, I think on Exhibit A of the archaeological license agreement, you'll see the map of the park, and here I have it in green highlighted. So Mr. Peters has already began working in the area with the Eagle Scouts, putting in a educational trail at the north end near the sanitation plant. And what we're going to be doing from the archaeological standpoint is laying a grid out across this entire property, kind of an imaginary grid, using GPS units. You can see here what that would look like, and say each unit runs roughly 2 by 2 meters. And we're going to be walking along this grid, sticking in line, going from north to south, starting at the north end just because it's already being cleared, and that's going to be the easiest way for us to enter the park is through the north end right now. And there's already just impact with the trail being built, so we want to get in there and make sure there's nothing being disturbed with that trail already being built. So we're going to be starting at the north end, and we're going to be walking transects, going north to south, and we're going to be just looking as we're walking for any interesting material we find. If we do find any artifacts, we'll be collecting that, and I'm going to talk about the collection process in a minute. And as we're walking, maybe we'll also see some features, and features are basically kind of odd depressions that don't look like they belong there, or maybe a mound or anything like that. We'll be documenting as well as we're walking. Now, as we're walking, we're going to be doing test pits as well. That's these little dots on the grid. Say every 4 meters or so, we'll be stopping along our transect, and we'll be conducting a very small excavation. Just kind of doing a small sounding in the earth to see if there's anything there of archaeological importance. And we'll be collecting, of course, those finds as well. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about the test pit. But here you see that there's maybe about 20 to 30 test pits, if it's all open and if we're working on a field. But since we're not working in an open field, a nice flat plain, it's going to be more of a Swiss cheese pattern, I think, at the end. So we're going to be actually maybe opening up, 15 to 20 test pits at the very end. And we're going to have to be dodging a lot of various obstructions, boulders, trees, and then we're going to be avoiding some of the steep inclines along the east side, and obviously not walking too close to the river because we don't want any of our volunteers washing away. So now to detail about the test pits, what that will include is, here you see a cross-section of the earth, and with some potential finds, we might here we go. So we got a deer bone, we have a potsherd here, a modern day quarter featuring Michigan, and a notch point, and a mastodon bone here. So as we're walking, and say every 4 meters, I haven't quite decided yet how far apart the test pits will be spaced, but I'm just saying 4 meters here. Right now, I think that's a good spacing to start at right now. So we'll dig those shovel test pits, and you can see we've already decided on in the agreement that it will be no more than 18 inches wide and no more than 18 inches deep. And so we will take out any interesting artifacts we find here. So here we got the potsherd. And we're not going to be digging, trying to squeeze it over, and maybe there's, mastodon over here. Too bad. If it's 18 by 18, we're not going to be digging any more than that. And in most cases, I think we're going to be digging less than that because there's often bedrock or sterile soil that we'll be reaching. And if there's a tree stump right at 4 meters, we're just going to skip this area, and we're not going to dig a test pit at all. We're just going to walk another 4 meters and do our next test pit. We're not going to dig next to the tree stump or anywhere. We're going to stick to this rigorous plan. So in terms of collecting and documenting, I just want to stress 2 main points. One, that all standard state, national archaeological best practices will be met and likely exceeded. I already have experience working for the U.S. Department of Agriculture at a federal level as an archaeologist, so I'm very familiar with federal laws, and here in Michigan I'm also in contact with Dean Anderson, who's the state archaeologist. So I will be following all these rules as an archaeologist, and also my training abroad. Maybe I'll even use some European standards. We'll add that to the mix. And I'll also be following, as outlined in Exhibit C, the state national laws regarding the finding of human or funerary remains and significant paleontological finds. So we'll be sticking to that. So in terms of our methods, other than walking in the area and doing the test pits, these are the really only invasive impact that we'll be having on the actual property. The other methods that we'll be using are just archiving everything through the GPS, taking notes, taking photographs, and of course all this material will be available to the city of Saline. I'll probably be doing monthly or even weekly reports, submitting everything that we're finding, all the details to the city of Saline. What's important to note will be actually later off-site, the processing of the artifacts, what we decide to do with them in the very end. Again, this is important. The city of Saline will have to be involved with whether we send it off to be studied and researched at the University of Michigan, if we're going to display them at the Depot Museum, if we're going to just put them in storage, or if we're just going to toss them. This will all be discussed with the city of Saline before we make any decisions. So just actually the collection is very simple. We bag the items on site. Off-site, we're going to be washing and drying them, labeling them, and then we're going to prepare them for long-term storage. The storage is a plastic bag in a plastic box. It's very nothing too high-tech, and we'll probably be storing most of the things at the Saline Depot Museum and processing at the Rentschler Farm. Both of these are city-owned properties and run by the Saline Area Historical Society. So, and I just want to note again that all the material belongs to the City of Saline, and we will not be moved or shared with any government officials, academics, or members of the public without proper authorization from the City of Saline. So, based on what we find, and if we do see any interesting features, in the future we would potentially like to excavate. The excavation will follow all the same best practices as the survey did. We'll be again using the grid system, and this time opening up only 1 meter by 1 meter. Well, yeah, we'll be opening up 1 meter by 1 meter units and excavating generally till you hit bedrock or sterile soil. And Mr. Peters has already noted some very interesting spots in the area. There's some military encampments. Obviously, the springs are down south, and the trail is already built here. So there could be some potentially really great spots here in the park for us to excavate in the future. But the survey and the test pits will verify that. And then the excavations will differ mainly from the surveying, because we'll also be probably talking to a lot of specialists. We'll be bringing in outsiders. It won't be just Saline members working in the site at this point. It will be maybe U of M specialists and period specialists that we'll be talking to as well. But again, this will all be approved by the city, and we're kind of treating the this archaeological license agreement as a living document. So we'll be talking with Todd in the future if we do, Mr. Campbell, the city manager, if we do plan to excavate. Obviously, the city will be informed, and we can add an addendum to this. And that is it, if anyone has any questions. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions? Mr. Rose.
Not a question, but a comment. That is, I'm really pleased to see a professional exploration of Salt Springs parks being planned, because it's too easy for people to just get curious and excited about things, go down there and start digging into stuff, and that would really ruin it. And my other thought was that Mr. Peters could have added another language to your resume, and that is, you seem to be relatively fluent in the English language. I think you could claim that one.
That's fine. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? Mr. Burgoyne?
I support the same comments that Mr. Rode just gave.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, Dave, I think your credentials are most impressive. We appreciate your time and your interest in this project, and I think we expect great things.
Okay, super.
And Mr. Peters, or former council member Peters, we appreciate your continued leadership on this. We're indebted to you. Thank you very much. If there's nothing further, then I guess we'll proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think it was Mr. Gearbaugh who moved a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo, and that was seconded by Mr. Burgoyne. Is there any subsequent discussion or comment? No, then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of acknowledging receipt signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Now I would seek a motion to approve or not to approve the archaeological license agreement between the City of Saline and the Saline Area Historic Society as presented.
Motion to approve.
Let's go with Roth as the mover and Burgoyne as the second. And if it was Ms. Saibo Koenig or Ms. Tahar who was also interested in supporting this, I'll get you next time. Okay? So that was moved by Roth, seconded by Burgoyne to approve. Is there any subsequent discussion? No?
I want to make
please.
I just want to make a comment.
Absolutely.
Want to thank Davia for volunteering, Mr. Peters for all his work that he's done, the Boy Scout, and in advance for all the other volunteers making this possible.
Absolutely.
And it's just been all volunteer work, and I certainly appreciate your expertise and willing to come forward and be a very active resident to our city of Saline.
Thank you. Well, if there's nothing further, then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of approving the agreement signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you again very much. We move on to new business item 14-191. This is a microbrewery license. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 4th, 2014 letter from Jerry Studds and to approve or not to approve the application from Stony Lake Corporation for the following license: new microbrew license, new small winemaker license, and new small distiller license. And to authorize or not authorize the clerk to sign the application and to submit to the Michigan Liquor Control Commission.
Move to approve and authorize?
Thank you, Councilwoman Cybo Koenig. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Is the applicant here? Wonderful. Well, thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. Would you like to maybe give us a little bit of an overview of what you
Sure.
have planned, and we'll maybe open it up for questions then?
Alrighty, my name's Jerry Tubbs, not Stubbs, but that's all right.
Okay.
But
That's a typo. My
that's
apologies.
okay. No, that's fine. I'm as I mentioned in my application packet to the council and to Mr. Rubel, Stony Lake Corporation is asking for local government approval from the city of Saline for a microbrewery to be located at 447 East Michigan, which is within the complex where unfortunately the ACO just departed. The local government approval is required. The local government approval that this application be considered for approval by the Michigan Liquor Control Commission is required as part of the license application with the state of Michigan. So this application I brought to the council is their response. I've made application to apply for a microbrewer's license. I've made application to the federal government for a brewer's notice, which is the taxation, alcohol, and tobacco, the side to make sure I pay all my excise tax on any beer produced. And then I have to make application, which I have already done with the state of Michigan. These applications are quite far along. As part of that application, I had to secure a location. The location is required first, so I have signed a lease with Jaster Corporation at 447 East Michigan. Those applications have been going for, I think, almost 4 months now. So now we've reached the point of the application where they've reviewed everything and said, now we need your local city government. The site, my plans for the site is really it's a microbrewer's license, but it's really a very small system. It's considered in the industry what would be called a nano brewery. It's a 3-barrel system, which is approximately 93 gallons. So a batch of this, if you're familiar with any of the other local microbreweries, there can be quite large systems of 15 to 30 to 50 barrel kettles and fermentation units. So my vision for this, I'm a microbrewery craft beer enthusiast. I've been brewing beer for a while. I've developed a portfolio of about 16 to 20 craft beer recipes. I'm also making an application, I should have mentioned at this time, for a small winery, winemaking license and a small distillation license. The small winemaking license is really, I need that because I also, as part of my business plan, would like to serve a hard cider, which is more like an apple wine. And I need that. That's under different licensing with the state of Michigan and the government. The small distillation, I don't currently distill alcohol, but it's a very common add-on when you're going through this whole process. It's something down the road. It's kind of it goes along with a lot of these businesses where they make just a little bit of maybe like a vodka or a rum to serve. As far as serving at the location, I'm only allowed to serve what is produced on site. So I'm not allowed to bring in other beer or liquor or wine from any outside facility or developer. It's only what I've made. Some of you've probably, as I'm sure you're aware, Milan has Original Gravity that they put in. Chelsea has the Chelsea Ale House microbrewery. The Jolly Pumpkin in Dexter is quite well known. In fact, they've just redone their tap room there. Tecumseh Brewing Company in Tecumseh is hoping to open this fall. They're in kind of a little bit further along in the process. Ann Arbor has numerous microbreweries. Some of their larger ones are Wolverine State Brewing, which is down behind the old Big George's, just in a little warehouse there. They're known for making lagers, not ales. I'm an ale producer. There's Arbor Brewing, which has their downtown location, and then they also have Corner Brewery in Ypsilanti. And these are all very, I'm sorry, I apologize, I don't know if anyone's a craft beer enthusiast, if anyone frequents microbreweries, but they're not really I don't consider them a bar or a bar atmosphere. In my location, I don't plan to have any televisions or have a sports bar. I'm not initially serving food. Long-term plan, I would like to, the site at the old Jasmine restaurant has a full kitchen, everything but the stoves and equipment like that they've taken with them, but all the ventilation and drainage, stainless steel sinks, is all there for that usage. Initially I would allow take-in from the local Saline takeout, the pizza, the many restaurants in Saline. I would allow order in or carry in food, which is a model that's very popular. Original Gravity started out that way. Wolverine State Brewing went several years, and they've just now opened up a small kitchen on site. So it's a very sustainable model. It fits in nicely with my business plan. I don't want to overextend. I know how to brew beer, and I want to really concentrate that the beer is a good quality that represents the business well, and I don't want to get bogged down in trying to run a kitchen and a restaurant, which is a whole another industry. But some of the features I like to think that we could offer Saline. I like the location, despite the fact that it's a little bit vacant right now. But I like the location. It has plenty of parking. It has room for expansion within that facility if that needs be. Right now, I don't really see a need for expansion, at least in the first couple of years. The way these microbreweries are run across the state, Michigan's number 5 in the nation with microbreweries, pubs, and brew pubs. It's really a community meeting place. There's not a TV. There's a lot of games, usually Wi-Fi. It's almost like a more of a coffee house atmosphere, but in a beer environment. So I'm fully funded on this project right now, so I'm not waiting on any loan approvals or investment. And the craft brew enthusiasts are drawn to these locations from all over the state. And we spend a lot of time going to different microbrews, and there's a whole community of people. It draws a lot of nice attention to the city. And but Sarah, I think that's. I don't really have any other thing. If there's any questions.
No, appreciate that, Mr. Burgoyne.
I think this will be a real plus for us. I like this.
Mr. Rhodes.
Mr. Tubbs, when do you anticipate opening?
Well, I can, currently my lease is, I have some build out. One of the reasons I chose the location where I'm at is it requires very little build out, and the fact that it already has kind of a restaurant set up with inside. I would need furniture. I've got to do some stuff to the floor, but I've held off on any large build out in construction right now, because if for some reason my license doesn't go through the state, I'm not that well funded where I want to walk away from putting too much, but I'm keen to go. And also, unfortunately, it's kind of a black hole with the feedback from the state. They kind of let me know what the next step is, and they don't give me a lot of feedback. But historically, talking with other brewers and local brewers and other out-of-state microbrews closer to my size, being a small nano brewery, I'm hoping that with this, if I receive the city's approval for the state to move ahead with this, it could come through within the next month to 2 months. And at that point, I would, well, actually, with the city, if I have the city's approval, I'm confident enough that I'm going to start more of my larger expense builds out. So I could, given, I can't brew anything until I have my license, and I can't begin brewing, and I can't sell anything that's not brewed under the license. So from the date, if I receive the state's licensing approval, it would probably take me just close to 8 to 10 weeks to produce enough beer to be confident to open up. So if I can have this license from the state within 2 months, which would put us in the, would put us in, October, close to November time frame. I'm looking at about the beginning of the first of the year.
Okay.
Give or take a few weeks or so.
Okay, thank you.
Are there additional questions or comments? Mr. Burgoyne and then Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
What is the other document that is said to be missing in the deficiency report?
Oh, that's and I'm not sure why they, I didn't bring that. That was I'm sorry, I didn't bring that with me, but it's from my corporation. It's asking me to list all of our officers within the corporation, which is, I'm a director and my wife Heidi is a director. So I just I filled that out and I've just sent that off to them. Okay. I actually filled that out with the original application, but I'm not sure why they didn't receive that. But.
Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Yes, thank you. So pending something unexpected from the state, this is the last step, you believe?
This is I think anything I would come up from the state right now that could impact this would be them they're going to have to come out and do an on-site inspection. So it might be, I have to change the drainage, for instance, or maybe I have to, the federal government's very concerned with security because it's a taxed product, so they want to make sure that the beer that's taxed, that they're yet to be paid taxed on, is in a secure location and not somewhere. So I don't really see anything that won't be able to be worked out. It's a great location. It's for the size of my endeavor, there's plenty of room, and I don't see anything there might be a slight delay. If they ask me, I might have to do a little construction within the building.
And,
Please.
And do you, long-term, assuming that everything goes well, would you anticipate moving from nano brewery status to microbrewery, or are you really focused on this level of
I could grow
craft?
A little bit more in this location. I couldn't really, a lot of what you run into with the larger tanks is foundation, and those units just aren't set up to carry that weight or the height of the tanks. But I would say for my first 5 years, if I increased, I might go from like a 3-barrel to a 5 or 7-barrel system, which is still a very low volume system. But I don't have a desire to bottle or distribute. I might, but with recent changes in the Michigan liquor law, which has typically been a 3-tier system, where I would have to go through a distributor to sell to like a Bush's or a restaurant. They've changed that, so if you're producing under 6,000 barrels a year, you can self-distribute, much like Spotted Dog does. The small winery has had this advantage for a while. So I could see that I might go down over to Wally and Max and do a tap takeover, or see if I could, put a keg on one of their taps. But that's about the extent of my distribution would be like that. And the location I'm at wouldn't lend itself for me to do any large distribution or grow too much.
Thank you.
Anything further? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just wondering a little bit about the experience. So my familiar is with the Spotted Dog, and trying to understand, is it just tasting, or can you just have as many beers as you want, or can you purchase a growler, all of that?
They call it a tasting room, but in reality, it is a run like a bar or a pub. So customers can come in and purchase for on-site consumption. They also, one of the state laws is that they can also, through using like a growler, which is about a half-gallon jug or vessel of some kind, they can take and purchase alcohol only for, if it's in that container, it has to be for off-site consumption.
Thank you.
Well, if there's nothing further, I think I speak for everyone on council when we say we're very excited and very pleased that you decided to make this investment in our community. We wish you nothing but success, and we hope that your business will breathe some new energy and life into a shopping center, into an area in town that desperately needs it. So we thank you for that. I have to chuckle, and Mr. Gearbaugh may be able to join me based on the fact that his family has been here for some period of time. Hard cider has become very trendy, and you go to Whole Foods and you go to Plum Market and you see it in fancy glass bottles and champagne bottles, and it goes for $20, $30 a pop. That's what people in Saline used to drink 75, 80 years ago when they were too cheap to go to the store to buy wine, or beer for that matter. So I have to laugh about that, but I think your business plan seems pretty solid, and the other thing I want you to know, and we tell this to every entrepreneur, is use city staff and use the folks here at City Hall as a resource. Not only Mr. Rubel, but our business ambassador, Ms. Korfman. All of us are here to help. So if you have a question or concern, reach out to us. That's what we're here for.
Great, I appreciate it. Mrs. Royal has been very helpful through this whole process coming forward with this. So
Terrific.
I appreciate that.
We appreciate that very much. Well, if there's nothing further, appreciate your time this evening. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for your time.
Is there any subsequent discussion? No, then it's been properly moved by Councilwoman Cybo Koenig and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar to approve, acknowledge, and to authorize. Or, excuse me, acknowledge, approve, and authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you again.
Thank you.
We move on to new business item 14-192. This is US 12 maintenance contract with MDOT. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 3rd, 2014 memo from DPW Director Fordyce and to approve or not to approve a 5-year contract with MDOT for routine maintenance, of US 12 within the Saline city limits, and to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the contract after review and approval by the city attorney.
Motion to acknowledge receipt and approve.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Roth. Mr. Fordyce, or DPW Director Fordyce, do you care to make a comment at all, sir?
This is a renewal of an ongoing contract, 5-year contract cycle, so that city staff can be reimbursed for maintenance activities along US 12. We do the snow plowing on this state route and minor intermittent maintenance activities. And we're available and have small budgets to do some other emergency work, such as tree removal or storm sewer repairs. Primarily, it's street sweeping and snow removal. That's the bulk of our budget, and most of the other items are standby items in case there's an occurrence that MDOT can't address quickly.
Are there any questions for Mr. Fordyce? Mr. Burgoyne?
What kind of tree trimming or whatever do you do? Because I noticed in front of Bush's, right at the entrance to Bush's, that there's a light with a tree blocking the light. So
Our tree trimming is limited to emergency basis.
Okay.
The normal maintenance of trees within the right-of-way is an MDOT responsibility.
So we pay for the street light, but if the light doesn't go to the ground, it's MDOT's responsibility, and they would come and...
It depends on where the tree is located. If it's in the right-of-way, then it would be MDOT responsibility. If it's adjacent to the right-of-way, it's the private property owner.
Anything else,
Thank you.
Mr. Burgoyne? No?
No, that's it.
Yes, Mr. Rhodes and then Mr. Gearbox.
Since this is a multi-year contract, I was wondering what the impact of the Michigan Avenue reconstruction in 2016 is going to have on your responsibilities to take care of Michigan Avenue.
Well, certainly during construction, that portion from Maple to the Saline River Bridge will be the contractor's responsibility. But we would have a backup role, assistance role, depending on what the traffic staging for that is. There may still be open traffic lanes that need maintenance, so we would be on call for filling potholes and maintaining traffic through the what lanes are left open. And ideally, I haven't seen a finalized, obviously we don't have a final design for that, and so there's not a final construction schedule, but I would anticipate that they're going to attempt to finish that project within one construction season, so we would still then be on call for the snow clearing through the winter.
I was wondering if you anticipated any reduction in funding because we don't have the whole road to take care of for some period of time.
That's a possibility. The budget is created every year. It's a 5-year contract, but the budget amount is not the way we're contracted with MDOT. Our budget is not explicit in the contract. Okay. So that's an annual negotiation, if you will, that I sit down with the area maintenance superintendent, and we work out what needs to be done over the next year.
And my last question is this increase in salt pricing that we all have been reading about. Is that factored into the negotiation you do with
that
MDOT?
will be, yeah. Our MDOT runs on a different fiscal year than we do, so our MDOT budget is October 1st through September 30th. So we are working on the upcoming budget right now, and we're going to have to factor in that increased salt cost, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gira.
Just curious, have we always had a 5-year contract? Has it always been 5?
As far back as I went in the file, yeah.
I couldn't remember.
It's
Just
5
curious.
years,
And then
yeah.
the other thing, do we normally max out the full amount of reimbursement from them or not?
No. We typically come quite close. You know, it's a $33,000 budget, and typically we're in the high 20s. Right now we're right around 31 out of the 33, because we've obviously had a pretty expensive winter. So.
Okay. I just was curious to make sure that we take our full advantage where we can.
Well, it's a reimbursement. You know, it's not really.
But if we're repairing roads and potholes and things like that, that we should.
Yeah, we get. Yeah, any work we do on Michigan Avenue is we're compensated for that.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Fordyce? Discussion?
If there's no further discussion, it's been properly moved by Burgoyne, seconded by Roth to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 14-193. This is request to waive tax bill late fees at 500 Amherst Circle. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 11th, 2014 memo from City Treasurer Bennett and the September 3rd, 2014 letter from Julie Dunefold requesting waiver of tax penalty and interest on real property taxes at 500 Amherst Circle.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Burgoyne. Ms. Bennett, do you want to come up? Do you care to comment at all on this and, of course, the subsequent motion as well? It's your choice, but.
Absolutely. Well, on this 500 Amherst Circle, the resident had sent in and saying that she had checked on the Saline website several times, and she is a resident of Oakland County, and they have different due dates and stuff like that. So out of this memo, we can take some suggestions and make some improvements to our website, absolutely. But our bills are immediately posted out there, so, and it says to pay the bills online. Maybe we should also change it to say view the bills for future assistance for the people. And then we do publicize in the local newspapers and online the due dates, and so.
Okay. Any questions for City Treasurer, Mr. Burgoyne?
Of the tax bills that we sent out, approximately what percentage is paid on time?
When it's all said and done, right, we always send a letter immediately after. That letter went out before the end of the week after they were due. And, we're usually around 90% when it's all said and done.
So you have about 10% that are late?
Yes.
Okay, so of those 10% that are late, most people pay the penalty?
Yes, sir.
I guess, because we don't see people streaming in here, that there would be quite a lot of people. I mean, 10% is that like 300? It's a big number.
Anything further, Mr. Burgoyne?
No?
Okay. Any additional discussion? No, then it's a motion on the floor to acknowledge receipt of the memo, moved by Rhodes, seconded by Burgoyne. Any subsequent discussion? Okay. All those in favor of acknowledging receipt signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 14-194. This is a request to waive penalty bill late fees at 13 Dogwood Court and 313, Dogwood Court, and 523 Sycamore Circle. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 11th memo from City Treasurer Bennett and the September 3rd, 2014 letter from Teresa Van Hout requesting waiver of tax penalty and interest on real property tax at 313 Dogwood Court and 523 Sycamore Circle.
Motion to acknowledge receipt.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Rhodes. Ms. Bennett, again, do you care to comment on this?
No, I mean, she admits in her letter that she totally missed the deadline. Obviously, she had some underlying circumstances, but, you know, the bills go out July 1st and are due on September 1st, and my sympathies, we've all been there.
Okay. Subsequent discussion, Mr. Burgoyne?
Could you give us an idea of exactly what changes you intend to make? Do you intend to, in the future, how would you be more specific on the website, or what other, how else would you change the way that you provide information?
To try to get the, well, you know, in the first citizens' comments, you know, she made the comment that she was looking to view her tax bill. Our link says to pay your tax bill, so maybe if someone was not going to pay their taxes online, they would just be looking for view. I also noted that, you know, we could make sure that we put that in on the front page when we are coming close to that due date to draw attention to it, have the view pay bills, and then remembering that not everyone is, you know, using online access and stuff like that, to make sure that we get our FYI newsletter, which it does say in our FYI newsletter, the due dates on the calendar in there, as well as an article, but kind of just reiterate those things and try to move that maybe to a little bit more to the front page. And encourage our residents to call us at any time with any of those questions that they can't find on our website. You know, the website is obviously a moving target. You think with your mentality and your mindset on how you're going to go out and search for something, but that's not the same for everybody. So we're always taking input and suggestions on how we can better get the word out on our website and other ways too. So it's a moving target constantly, and we're always needing to update it and make it fresh.
Mr. Burgoyne, please.
In terms of the way that people pay bills, my understanding is that mortgage companies, banks that hold money probably pay a few days prior, but maybe in the last couple of weeks. Some people pay as soon as they get their bill, and some in the middle. Is it pretty spread out?
It's pretty spread out. We have quite a few that are, I mean, the bills get delivered and we're surprised at the 25, 30 people that show up that afternoon with their bill in hand, and it's like, wow, that just got in your mailbox today and you're here to pay it. Our mortgage companies, majority of our tax bills are paid by mortgage companies, and those are all done electronically now. The mortgage company, accesses our database online and sends us in a check with the list of the parcels, and we can just mark them, and the click of a button, they're all paid. And then we do have quite a few citizens. It used to be the last day of taxes, people were lined up. I think that's when interest rates wouldn't paid for them to hold on to their money. But right now, it's really not. They start waiting until later, but typically it's Fridays are still always good tax days, paydays.
Mr. Burgoyne, did you have anything further,
No.
sir? Okay,
No,
thank you. I'm sorry. Mayor Pro Tem Tar.
Yeah, I just also wondered if there might be an effort, if it might be helpful to encourage people to sign up for online receiving their bills and paying their bills online as another way to get that they could receive the word in a timely manner and not have to even go looking for it. If you sign up, as I recall, since I do this, I should know, you don't have to go looking, you get a notice in your email, which can sometimes be more immediate than an
Yeah, and with
envelope
our
in the mail.
latest conversion on our water and sewer program, we have gathered a lot of email addresses for people who wanted to go, paperless or to go green and to get that email notification. And with that process, we've also turned that over not only for emailing we can't go paperless. State law still requires us that you have to send a physical paper to the last known resident on file. So we can't go paperless with tax bills, but we can go green and send them a copy in their email. And we also encourage them now that you can do the auto pay and set that up for both your water and your taxes. So, I mean, we still have quite a few people who like to come in and give us even cash for taxes, which still amazes me. But, those people, and we welcome them, but we do have a lot of different options and ways that you can pay your bills. In fact, when I went up to the bank at Key Bank, she goes, "Didn't we used to collect these for you?" And I'm like, "Well, you're dating both of us now," because that was years ago. But the banks are still willing to take your tax payment if for some reason, our offices were closed. And we also have the drop box. And in this year's budget, I did get another drop box approved, and I'm working out the logistics of having an outdoor drop box here in the parking lot. So there would be the lobby drop box, the drop box located up behind the Comerica Bank in our municipal parking lot. And then in addition, we would have an additional drop box here for 24/7 delivery of bills.
I think your suggestions about the website are excellent. One quick question, and I'll get Mr. Gearbaugh and Mr. Roth here. Is the due date for both tax bills and utility bills listed on the bulletin board that's on the easel when you walk in the front door?
Well, that's a good question. I will check.
Do you know that, Terry?
I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry.
You'd just be surprised how many people
Yeah, that's an excellent
just stop
point.
and see that. And if
Yep.
we're just trying to disseminate that information a little bit more, that would seem like a no-brainer to me. I apologize, Mr. Gearbaugh.
No, that's all right. I was just going to suggest maybe we put it on our calendar of events and just put it on there as a thing
Yeah,
in the future.
that was
That
another
was the idea.
suggestion. I thought we could do that too.
Because I think that worked.
I've been trying to tweet it and put a Facebook reminder out that, your tax bills are due tomorrow or stuff like that, but.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine, but I think if this
Yep.
is the area that everybody's going to go look to, I think it'd be a great idea. I'm just curious, how frequently is our Dropbox used uptown?
Our Dropbox is used a lot uptown. We check that on a daily basis, and when we don't check it, so like right now, we're not collecting any payments that are due, but during a water bill month, it is checked daily, and we probably get anywhere from 5 to 10 a day in that box. And then I know that the clerk's office is also receiving a lot of absentee ballot applications. Today I picked up 15 out of there. So it gets used a lot, and it is checked daily for the most part. When we're not in an election mode and we're not in election and collection mode, we may not check it daily, but we do every time I go to the bank, I'll check it, which is biweekly anyway for Comerica payroll.
Oh, good.
So, yeah, we get a lot of people using that Dropbox.
Mr. Gearbaugh, do you have anything further, sir?
Nope.
No? Mr. Roth?
I just want to make a comment on both of these, 14-193 and 14-194. The way that it's listed here is that we're just acknowledging the receipt and not complying to the request.
Correct.
And that was a different format that has been used previous agendas. So I just want to note the changes before as far as to acknowledge their request. And this is now just acknowledging the letters. So someone appears to have made a decision whether we're going to waive or not waive prior to putting it on this agenda item.
Well, the clerk is informing me that the motion has always read to acknowledge receipt, but we can confirm that for next.
But if I recall right, that we typically didn't respond to such a motion because there was following the request.
We can look at that, see what's been done in the past.
So I just want to say there is a change. I want them to understand that, yes, we looked at it, but we weren't asked to act on it.
Correct. And of course, please note that, there are obviously motions that are prepared in advance that are placed on the agenda. However, at any time, a council member is welcome to offer an alternative motion or an amendment to any motion that's been enumerated and articulated on the agenda. But we will look into that, Mr. Roth, and come back with a report at our next meeting. Is there anything further for our city treasurer? Mr. Burgoyne.
I'm just commenting on Mr. Roth's comment. My recollection is that sometime in the past, several years in the past, perhaps, no action was taken on the item because it was an action item at the time. I think acknowledging receipt the way it is today, I like better. Okay. I like that better than taking no action because you can be fully informed, you can have a discussion, and as the mayor said, somebody can offer a motion if they want. So I think rather than having it there and taking no action and not addressing it at all, I prefer to address it, to think about it. And I think this is okay. I like this.
I agree with that, but I just want to point out that there is a difference in the wording.
And we'll verify that and bring back something to report at our next meeting, I believe on October the 6th, is it? Yes. Okay, very good. If there's nothing further on this motion, it was properly moved by Burgoyne, seconded by Rhodes to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it and the motion carries unanimously. Our last action item of the evening is new business item 14-195. This is the purchase of a police vehicle. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 3rd, 2014 memo from Police Chief Rennick and to approve or not to approve the purchase of a 2015 Chevrolet Tahoe PPV four-wheel drive patrol vehicle from Crispin Chevrolet at a not-to-exceed amount of $31,890 and to have the vehicle outfitted at Great Lakes Emergency Products at an amount not to exceed $7,419.37. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
You want to acknowledge receipt as well, Mr. Burgoyne?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Been moved by Councilmember Burgoyne to acknowledge receipt and to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Chief Rennick, do you care to comment on this at all?
Just real quickly, this is, of course, as you read in the motion, this is actually a four-wheel drive vehicle, which will be in addition to our fleet of two-wheel drive Tahoes. And this year's color will be tungsten metallic, which is actually a dark gray.
Very good. Well, let me just say very quickly that I'm very pleased that we are adding a four-wheel drive vehicle to our inventory. I know it comes at a additional cost, but I think it's important to have that type of traction and mobility in snow during inclement weather. I think that's good for officer safety and ultimately good for the public safety. The one thing that I want to mention, and this is not quite germane, but it sort of is, and you and I have talked about this, and it was alluded to earlier by Christina Turner when she was talking about the triathlon. Our AED machines, defibrillators that are in our police cars, obsoleted, out of date, is my understanding from a previous conversation with you. We can't get parts for them. I do think it's vital that our police cruisers have that technology. I know it has saved lives in the past. I suspect it will save lives in the future. So whatever we can do as a council to help find that money, if we need to go out and solicit it, similar to what we did with the video recording system, I'm happy to be a partner and an advocate for that as well. So just wanted to keep that on your radar because I'd like to move on that sooner as opposed to later.
And I'd just like to say that since you and I talked, I've already checked on it, and I've got 3 bids for what it's going to cost. As a matter of fact, I have an agency that specifically sells to law enforcement at a discount of about 35%. So we're going to be able to get these a lot cheaper than we did in the past.
Very good. Excellent. Okay. Are there any questions? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just remind me, what did we allocate in the budget for?
We allocated 45,000, and the total cost is going to be 39.3, about $5,600 under budget.
Okay, so potentially we could use those funds for your new defibrillators. Okay.
Anything further? Mr. Rhodes.
I certainly support the purchase from a local dealership, particularly with a cost difference of less than $200.
He had to scrape pretty hard to get there, too.
Well, please give him our compliments.
I will. As a matter of fact, I saw the actual sticker price of the Tahoe. It's just a hair over $50,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we did very well.
Excellent. They're nice vehicles.
Very nice vehicle.
Yeah. Well, if there's nothing further, it's been properly moved by Burgoyne, seconded by Tahar, to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Chief, thank you very much. We move on to discussion items, commission, committee, and task force reports from members of council. No committee or commission or task force reports? Mr. Roth?
Commission, I have
Oh, yes.
distributed some information for the Cable Commission report, and it's regarding the finances, that how its finances come out from Comcast is 5% of their monies that they collect is distributed back to the city, and it's broken down as 2.2% goes to the schools, 2% stays with the city, and 0.8% goes to an attorney. And you see the figures as far as how it goes. The PEG fees, 2% of their income that they have comes as PEG fees, and 100% of that goes to the school and is used for only for capital expenditures. The city collects their money and they puts the money into the general fund. The schools take the franchise fees and they put all the franchise fees in the general fund. This past year, they put $67,700 plus into the general fund, and they spent $53,800 plus for that. So they had in reserve between $13,000 and $14,000 that they kept. So that's as far as information. Typically, the 7% of a person's bill that they have goes towards PEG and franchise fees. And what the customers get out of that is a local access station, which is channel 18, and we receive such programming as there, so it's our local station. We have a local bulletin board on it. At our commission, we discussed far as doing a survey, how this can better serve the community, and I would suggest the viewers would look for a survey or give information regarding as far as how that station could better serve the needs. So looking at far as my point of view, I'm trying to make at the meeting that we really need more time for, paid time for someone to actually work with the programming itself rather than producing the various spots that's on it. So it's something we're looking for as consideration, that it is a price, 7% of the customer's tax bill or Comcast bill goes toward that station, so it's a rather high price. So it's being looked into, so I thought that information needed to be shared with you folks.
Very good. We appreciate
the exact numbers you have on the document I provided for you.
We appreciate the financials, because I know as of late there have been some questions and concerns and some confusion about that, so that's very helpful, and we appreciate your leadership and work on that commission. It is very important. It is a useful medium to disseminate information, so keep up the good work. We appreciate the report, Mr. Roth.
The second one thing I want to report on, I went to the Watts Public Input Meeting. And I attended the one held at Manchester, their particular open house, and I provided you the information there that far as the open house was attended only by 2 people, and information there, they had their bulletin board for us, bulletin board, what Watts does, but their biggest concern, reason they're having the open houses are as far as a better way to communicate with the general public, communicate with us. So they developed a survey, and you can go to their website and do that survey. So if you attend one of their sessions, you can fill out a paper copy, or you can do such thing on the website, and I copied the survey for you. So you can consider as far as your use of time. I may have saved you some time by sharing this information with you, but what Watts about. So the whole emphasis with the survey is how they can better communicate, whether it's sending you newspaper articles, town meetings, or whatever it may be. So they're looking for the best way. I hope when they find that out that it's going to work for everybody, that we can boilerplate that for our communications. Kind of communicating with people, getting people to come to meetings and that type of stuff and be informed has always been a problem for whatever organization, the city, any clubs, churches, whatever it may be. Communication is a big problem, so maybe they'll come up with the answer for us. So that's what I have, and thanks for looking at the information.
Wonderful, appreciate it. Are there any other commission, committee, or task force reports? No? Okay. How about reports and other announcements? Mr. Gearbox.
I would just like to recognize Mr. Roth for doing a great presentation at the Mausoleum yesterday for the 100th anniversary of the construction of that facility. He had information on all the individuals that are interned in it, and there was quite a fascinating little bit of history for some of those individuals. So I appreciate for what you've done, and that was a great event.
Absolutely, it was a very nice event. I think Mr. Councilmember Rhodes was there as well, and a number of other community members. It was an excellent presentation, Mr. Roth. You did a lot of homework, a lot of research on not only the facility and its construction, but also on the individuals that are interned there. It was appropriate to pay respects and honor them, and many of them did contribute tangible things to this community. It was also wonderful to show off the work that had been done in that facility in recent years. I think people were pretty impressed, very pleased with where the direction that we've come in recent years. So again, thank you and the Historic Society for putting that on.
You're welcome, and I want to also mention I had some handouts, but it was 48 pages of such, so it was quite costly to reproduce. So anybody who didn't receive that or interested in what it said, you can go to the Saline Historical website. That information is listed there under history, and then it's listed as the Oakwood Cemetery. So it's there as a PDF format, everybody can read.
On the Society's website? On
the Society's website, and if they see any errors or omissions or I'd like to add something to it, please let me know, because that is a living document, even though it's about the dead.
Yeah. We appreciate that. Any other reports or announcements? Ms. DeHart.
Yes, just an announcement, two announcements related to our sister city in Germany. The first is on October 16th, a group of 20 students from the Lindenberg Gymnasium and two of their teachers will arrive for 2.5 weeks visiting Saline High School. It's planned that we will meet them here at a council meeting. Can't remember the date. And then also it appears, although this is just in the beginning stages of the discussion, we'll have a group of adult visitors from Lindenberg in early April of next year. We have cautioned them that the weather in Michigan in late March and early April is interesting, and their attitude is anyone who is a true Allgäuer, which is the region that Lindenberg is found in, will not be scared off by a little bit of snow or interesting weather. So the dates haven't been absolutely nailed down, but that's the time frame we're looking at right now.
Very good. Mr. Rhodes.
One other announcement pertaining to Saline Area Historical Society, and that is on Sunday, October the 5th, is harvest time at the Rentschler Farm. That's the closing down of the farm for the season, except for over Christmas probably. And it's also the dedication of the plaque which we received for Rentschler Farm being designated as a historical place on the National Registry.
Very good. Yeah, looking forward to that. Any other reports or announcements? I have just one which is pretty cool. This crossed my desk last week. I'm not a subscriber to Michigan's Super Lawyer magazine, but I suppose if you're in the business, it would be insightful and beneficial. But just wanted to bring to everyone's knowledge, or to attention rather, this magazine lists the most outstanding attorneys in the state of Michigan based on their field and level of expertise, and our chief counsel, Scott G. Smith, who specializes in state, local, and municipal law at Dickinson Wright, was recognized as one of Michigan's super lawyers. So a great distinction. So the next time you see Scott, be sure to congratulate him on this very impressive honor. Any other reports or announcements? No, then we move on to URS Road Diet Traffic Study. Mr. Rubel, Mr. Fordyce, do you want to come up and talk about the conference call that you two gentlemen had with City Manager Campbell and I? Was it last Wednesday?
The dates of events are summarized in the report.
Okay.
The one you talk about was, yeah, I didn't put a date, but it was
Last Wednesday?
At least a week ago.
Okay.
Yeah. September 10th.
Before you start, I do want to acknowledge again that we, as it relates to this issue, the road diet, we do have a letter in front of us from Mitch Rode, the CEO of Quantum Signal, for your consideration. Prior to the meeting this evening, Mr. Rhodes asked if he could speak first following the question period when Jeff and Gary are done presenting, and the chair will acquiesce to that request. So Gary, Jeff, if you want to take it over, and then of course we'll first open it up for questions and then comments. And the purpose for this discussion item is to develop consensus as to whether we want to move forward. If that is the desire of a majority of council, then an action item will appear on our next meeting agenda on October the 6th. Mr. Rubel.
Correct. At one of our earlier work meetings, maybe several months ago, the question came up about the road diet when we met with MDOT and their engineers about the initial phase of the preliminary plans and the streetscape project implications. And then that eventually led to a resolution the council passed in August, which was sent to Mr. Mark Sweeney, the TSC director, Brighton. And he subsequently responded to that, sending the checklist of what the requirements and criteria were. And so looking at the one of the main ingredients of the checklist is that it requires the city to perform traffic analysis, traffic study at our own expense, because the MDOT data on their traffic study had expired. It's more than 5 years old. So originally we had thought we could rely on existing traffic data and study, but 5 years is enough to warrant a restudy. Subsequently, looking at all the other items on the checklist, we quickly found out that the checklist requires study to be done by a certified engineer through the state of Michigan. And so we contacted URS thinking, well, they have all prior information. They're very familiar with the intersection capacities and everything else, and some of the traffic performance on site. And so Mr. Sean Kels put together the proposal. Specifically, I asked him to he would have to address all the items in the checklist, whether they were items that may or may not be relevant. MDOT makes a determination on that after you submit the study, if there needs to be more elements to be studied. So the main crux of the study is volume capacity impacts that a road diet may cause to reducing it from 4 moving lanes to 2 moving lanes. Their largest concern is the level of service at intersections. Currently, there's a very low level of service at Ann Arbor and US 12 intersection, and they feel that Sean Kels, looking at the first traffic data, thinks that basically you're going to have the outcome of the improvement to a road diet would result in probably a level of service at E or F, which I doubt would be accepted by MDOT. So that runs up a big red flag in that respect. So I contacted first Mr. Kelsch and ran over, reviewed all the elements on the checklist, what may or may not impact, some possible results of the study and MDOT consideration. And then I called Lynn Kirby, who's the project delivery engineer for the US 12 project for 2016. She recommended that we talk to Mr. Mark Sweeney, who's the manager of the TSC, because he's the one who would first receive the study materials from URS. He would perform an administrative review of it, but it would eventually be sent along with his comments to Lansing Planning, or some planning division of MDOT. So at that point, I'd received enough impact of concern that I decided we should have a conference call between city staff, MDOT administrative staff in Brighton and Mr. Sean Kell. So we had that, and of course the mayor participated in that also. And so we know from our conference call on September 10th that those concerns basically still remain as concerns. There does not seem to be a high credibility of, or not credibility, but a high, comfort that they would actually consider the road diet. I mean, we're not at that comfort level. So it appears that from our conversation with Mr. Mark Sweeney that it's doubtful that any benefits that they may find in this would outweigh the negatives. Any benefits, any pros would outweigh the cons. Specifically, the impacts that we are concerned about as far as reducing traffic on US 12 would put the traffic on the side streets, and those are some fragile areas, some sensitive areas. Might reduce response times for emergency vehicles, all concerns that were voiced there. And the tone basically of Mr. Sweeney was that it was not a real good positive tone on his behalf that he would give any serious consideration to the road diet, although he stated that, it's still our call whether or not we want to apply for the, go ahead and pursue the study, pay the $15,000, and then submit it to MDOT for their consideration. So there are some open questions out there. I don't know what else we can pursue, to make things a little bit better in regard to looking at the road diet. So I guess Jeff could add a few things too from his experience. I know I did talk about some of the local projects with them, and where they have used the road diet is situations that are less restrictive and less of a burden than the traffic shows on US 12 here for MIS weekends and other items.
Why don't we get Mr. Fordyce, since you also participated in that conference call, and you've got a pretty solid bit of expertise and background on these types of issues. Do you care to comment at all?
Sure. I guess certainly all the concerns that Gary mentioned are significant concerns, but at this point I would say they're all suppositions. These are things that could happen. They're things that maybe can be somehow mollified. What I came away from the conference call with MDOT, the major impression that I had is while MDOT shares all these concerns for possible ramifications of the road diet, that they were, I thought, surprisingly open to it, and that a drop in level of service was not necessarily a death knell for the project right from the get-go. I had gone in thinking that would be something that MDOT would say, a reduced level of service, forget it, that's done. But they did emphasize that if you are starting with that significant negative reduction in level of service, that you're going to have several other positives, safety being the primary one that seems to drive road diets in other situations. And they were also very clear, I thought, in that they would not consider in the benefit column the potential for a vibrant downtown, for increased businesses, visitations, things like that, that was not part of their equation at all. So those things, which would be I would think, the motivation to do a road diet is to create that downtown atmosphere, is not part of the equation.
Very good. Let me open it up again. I'm not looking for commentary at this juncture. I'm looking for comments to Mr. Rubel and or to DPW Director Fordyce based on their presentations. And then following questions, we'll move on to discussion. Mr. Burgoyne, you have some questions, sir?
Yes. If we had a presentation by URS, would we get a good explanation of the types of outcomes that they would hope for in their study, and give us further information, kind of round out the information more? Or is there no more information?
Well, I mean, the study that they're included in their proposal is to collect new data. This would be, real data from the 4 major intersections in this stretch, showing turning movements, through movements, the whole gamut of what's going through there during various peak hours. And then modeling that, taking that data and creating a model with a 3-lane profile and seeing how those traffic movements work with that profile, and then quantifying the level of service from those models. So, the one thing that, it is an intersection by intersection study, so whether there's some benefits to be had from coordinating the signals, just in terms of a throughput, there might be something there. But if the Ann Arbor 12 intersection is limited to, so many vehicles per hour that can get through there during peak hour, the synchronization is not going to change that. There's only going to be so many vehicles that can get through there.
You probably already experience, as I do, because when I leave sometimes at 5:20 like I did tonight, basically the roadway was stacked from Ann Arbor Street to Maple, certainly in 2 lanes for a large portion of it, and then 1 lane, and sometimes the cars want to block the intersection when it turns, even when it turns red. And so you always hope that they don't do that. And so you have this vision. And then, of course, when I cross Henry Street, I see a lot of cars that have already gone over to Henry Street and are trying to bypass the traffic downtown because they want to get to Monroe Street or rather go to Ann Arbor and turn. So, and we experience that now on Harris Street because people come off of Ann Arbor Street and jump over to Harris Street to get to the signal to jump on, and sometimes you have a little congestion there. So my fear is that, and I know from many projects in the past since 1987 that the people on Henry Street are very sensitive to traffic. In fact, we get complaints 2, 3 a year about too many cars on Henry Street now, that if we increase it by 50 or 100%, well, it's going to be objectionable. The other main thing about conducting the study is that part of it is a public hearing, and you see where I outlined it in here. There has to be a public hearing and public notice and even signs installed on the US 12 corridor telling all through traffic, since probably more than 90% of it is through traffic that's being impacted, that they have the opportunity to voice their opinions on the removal of 2 moving lanes through the downtown area. MIS would have to, and they say, it would be mandatory to involve MIS facility in that.
Which, well, I think Mr. Gearboss shares my sentiment on that. I think that, obviously, that's an MDOT policy. I think that's bordering on ridiculous.
That's my question. Is that an MDOT policy, or is this individual's concern? Because I've got a big concern that a private entity that's 60 miles away from us has the ability to influence what goes through our town.
Well, not influence, but at least give opportunity to give input.
Well, the way this made it was mandatory and required. He can have input, we can invite him, but when it says, please also know that coordination with the Michigan International Speedway will be required, that starts waving a flag of who's friendly with whom, and just my concern major on that. It's just an issue that I find very questionable from the perspective of the individual that's making that a requirement in a written document.
It's not too much coordination as a public notice that they be invited or noticed.
If that's more the way then, but the way this reads seems a little odd.
It's more of a stakeholder thing. Anybody who's influenced by this project has to have an opportunity to say something.
Okay,
but the verbiage is, I agree, the verbiage is troubling.
Yes, definitely troubling.
But in the conference call, you specifically said it was not a requirement that they approve of anything, just that they have that opportunity to speak.
Are there any other questions for staff, Mr. Burgoyne?
Do we know which months or which days of the year the peak travel times are? Do we know whether it's winter? Probably not summer, because there's summer vacations, so the schools would probably be out of it. But do we know when peak and lower travels are? And how would this study relate to that? How would they show, you know, whether something is a high point or a low point during the year?
Yeah, they certainly like to take midweek traffic counts and studies, but in a case like this, they will have to do probably hands-on intersection analysis, which means sort of like a tally board, or they have special counters that go out and measure the intersections. But they have, for US 12, they've been doing this for years and years on measuring traffic and turning moves and so forth. So they no doubt have seasonal calibration factors. So they know that, they know when the peak times occur. In fact, they regulate our permits and our activities by their known facts on when the peak hours occur going eastbound and westbound. So we are actually restricted, and the contractors are restricted when they can work in US 12 based on the performance of the traffic levels.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just curiosity, out of this study, even though we talk about road diet, but the amount of information that would be created, whatever, would help us justify pretty much all of our arguments. We don't have anything currently that supports our push for widening of 12 east of our town, or to deal with the whole issue to the county that says, you know, you're jamming too much traffic through our one roadway. But this would provide that kind of data that we really currently don't have, correct?
Well, the data that they would take here was between Mills and Maple would not really, I mean, they take traffic counts regularly on the whole corridor of US 12, and they plug it into their computers and generate models, and then they have to do their 5-year plan. So they know where their critical needs are for addressing the traffic flow, and then they try to plan accordingly. So I don't think there's a coordinated effort to make every section of US 12 work integrally, based on traffic flow, because the characteristics change. So I think they look at sections and segments. Some sections are burdened, some sections aren't. They hit the trouble spots.
Right, which ends up being a detriment to the community in which they run that through because they haven't thought about long-term planning. So, okay. But from that perspective, that's why I'm asking that question.
Any other questions for staff? All right, well, let's open it up. Gentlemen, thank you. Why don't you stay put in case there are additional comments that warrant a response. Again, the goal here is to develop consensus as to whether we want to move forward and engage URS to do a road diet traffic study. And if that is the majority's consensus, then that will come back as an action item at our subsequent council meeting. As I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion item, the chair will acquiesce to requests made by Councilmember Rhodes and allow him to speak first. So the floor is yours, Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was mentioned earlier that we had a letter from Mitch Road of Quantum Signal on the dais here, and I had not seen this before this evening, but I noticed in reading through it that he is a very strong advocate of seriously considering the reconfiguration of Michigan Avenue, and he has some very good points, I believe, in his letter. I did prepare some talking points this evening because I think that what happens with Michigan Avenue in 2016 is so important to our community. It's critical that we do what we can do to get it reconfigured, and so I prepared some comments that I'm going to read so that I don't miss anything. So if we continue to do nothing about Michigan Avenue, then we have failed to properly represent our citizens. Every SWOT exercise, and SWOT being strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, from the mid-90s has identified Michigan Avenue as a problem. People are either afraid or reluctant to cross the road, and as a result, our entire downtown suffers. And I probably could have said our entire community suffers. Sunday's issue of the Ann Arbor News has an entire page devoted to breathing life into downtown. That's on the front section of the Michigan section. And their starting comments are, walk into any thriving downtown in the state and you'll see a few key elements. First one is walkable streets, commercial space, public events, and most importantly, people. Jeff Speck's book, Walkable City, which many of you have had an opportunity to look through, cites many examples of successful road reconfigurations. It seems counterintuitive, but they did not increase congestion. Wider, smoother roads result in more traffic, and we don't need that in Saline. You may have noticed that even with 4 lanes, we sometimes get traffic backup for a couple of hours a day. Mr. Rubel mentioned that, referred to that. In my opinion, those backups are more the result of traffic lights stopping traffic, which then results in congestion. It seems that having synchronized traffic lights so a vehicle traveling at the posted speed would not have to stop would do more than anything else to relieve backups. It is not uncommon for different agencies to have priorities which are at odds with each other. MDOT, Michigan Department of Transportation's priority is to move traffic, while our priority is to maintain and, if possible, improve the quality of life for our residents. We cannot and we must not sit back and let MDOT tell us what to do for our community. We must use every means at our disposal to create a Michigan Avenue which will serve the needs of our community rather than the desires of those passing through. I urge all of us to let MDOT know that we don't want their standard road construction through our downtown. The reconstruction in 2016 will dictate the future of our community for the next 30 years. And if we don't work to improve Michigan Avenue, then we will have done a disservice to our residents and failed to properly represent them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rhodes. So you are in favor of proceeding?
I believe so.
Okay. Wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Who wishes to speak next? Councilmember Burgoyne, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Yeah, I think that we should discuss and vote on things that are on the agenda. I don't think that we should put things under discussion and not have an agenda item out there for the public. I think the items should be public, should be on the agenda, and it can be an action item or it can be just to receive and discuss. But I think we should have action items as part of our regular agenda and not put big decisions, not have us make the decision now and rubber stamp it next week. I'd rather hear from URS more on their proposal rather than make the decision now and get the data later.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Thank you. I have a number of comments. I will say first, I entirely agree with Mr. Rhodes, and I am also in favor of continuing consideration of having URS do the study. I made a number of notes on the memorandum, and so I'll just deal with those as I have them noted. The first is, in the first sentence, there's a reference to our resolution requesting that MDOT consider a road diet design. That's only part of the story. The resolution actually requested road diet and other traffic calming measures. So to focus it in on just the road diet, I think is a little bit too narrow. Secondly, in the second section on page 2, the summary of discussion comments, both of those I feel are incomplete, and they're based on undocumented assumptions. There's without a whole lot of supporting, in some cases, supporting information from, this would be from the folks at MDOT. For example, the last bullet point in the first section of summary, the ultimate large urban expansion into Saline Township would introduce more traffic. Well, I don't think we have any evidence that that necessarily is going to happen anytime in the foreseeable future. So that's just an example. I don't want to nitpick on specific points, except to use that as an example that I think there are assumptions here that need a whole lot more discussion before I would accept them as valid assumptions on which to make a decision. And then at the bottom there, in the notes from the comments from Mr. Sweeney, in the first point, MDOT's major goal in highway functionality is, and this is in boldface, the obligation to the motoring public. And I think MDOT's obligation is much broader than that, and I believe that it is incumbent upon us to remind them of that and hold them to their other obligations. I'll just quote a couple of things from the State Transportation Committee, State Transportation Commission Policy on Complete Streets, which is the document I copied and distributed. PA 135 of 2010, that's Complete Streets legislation, requires the development of Complete Streets policy to promote safe and efficient travel for all legal users of the transportation network under the jurisdiction of the Michigan Department of Transportation. So it's not just about vehicular traffic. And their mission is to provide appropriate access to all legal users in a manner that promotes safe and efficient movement of people and goods. So this is the policy that MDOT supposedly is operating under, and I believe that what we've seen so far in the memo and heard from them does not reflect all of what they are supposed to be doing. Later in the purpose section, there's another statement I'll just highlight. MDOT will pursue a proactive and consistent approach to the development of complete streets in keeping with its mission to provide the highest quality integrated transportation services for economic benefit and improved quality of life. So I see that as giving us a basis for also bringing in the quality of our downtown into the discussion. And then finally, I'll just mention on the very last page, this policy will apply to all projects undertaken by MDOT, large and small. So I interpret this to mean that Complete Streets legislation and our own Complete Streets ordinance in Saline do apply to this project, and that it's MDOT's responsibility to respond to that and to take that into account when they're working on this project. I did speak today also briefly with Mark Farrell, who is a transportation planner with Watts. His professional opinion is that Complete Streets does indeed apply to this project and needs to be taken into account. He also said he did not necessarily believe that it was the city's responsibility to pay for the traffic study. He's going to do more research on that, and he's also going to talk to MDOT. So finally, I guess I would just say, I agree with Mr. Rhodes. It's our responsibility to make sure that MDOT meets the needs of all users of our Main Street, Michigan Avenue. And in my opinion, what we've seen thus far doesn't seem to be in line with that. And I think it's up to us to hold MDOT to that responsibility. Thank you. In favor of proceeding with the study, absolutely.
Just to make sure I'm clear. Yeah. Who else wishes to speak on this item?
I just am impressed by Ms. Tarr's information that she's presented and is arguing our case that if MDOT wants us to do what they want, and we're told by public act that stuff is supposed to be reviewed in entirety, I'm going to hold them accountable for the same thing. We need to be treated identically like anyone else. So in my whole issue, whether a road diet's going to work or not, it's more the issue of the full transportation and what is going to happen with our downtown. And we have to deal with the whole issue and determine what's going to happen for the next 35 to 50 years, because I think it's farther than the 30 years. What happens now is going to be basically what will happen for the next 50 to 75 years.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Mr. Roth?
I hold probably a different opinion, probably closer in line with what MDOT has suggested. And I look as far as interpretation or semantics and so on, far as serving everybody. I think it's the broader interpretation that it's going to be anybody using such road, rather than picking it for we wish to how it serves us here as a particular city. I think they mentioned, it was reported that MDOT is not going to look as far as a walkable city and a better place to live and so on as a major criteria. That's a no discussion item. They rule that out. I think it's great that we're looking at for us how we can improve our downtown. I think as far as making it on the backs of the people using such road and other citizens within the city is probably something we need to consider deeper. Therefore, I'm not in favor of such. I look at far as we need to I haven't really heard from you people why it's so important and overrides what our walkable city, how we're gonna really change it. We are pretty much what we are. We can make some changes, but we're not gonna get rid of US 12. It's too late to make those changes where we had opportunities before. It was a bypass or that type of thing. When they put I-94 in, that was kind of supposed to be a bypass, but that kind of, where its construction that it went so far north and then it branched on down toward Indiana in Chicago area, made it that it was a longer truck route for someone to travel. And far as the reason the truckers end up using Michigan Avenue, it's a safer thing for them to do rather than travel on an expressway where they get tired and so on. They time-wise and money-wise, it becomes out about the same, but it's a safer route for them to take because they have to be alert to where they're driving. So it really helps out for safety issues. I look at far as the main street, going right down through the middle of it, is really kind of a problem. And I agree with far as I'd love to see it, but I don't think all these things fit our particular city. And we need to study, see if the shoe really fits. And we can have the desire for something, but then it may not be really practical. Spending another $15,000 on a study, which MDOT's that's not going to tell them what to do. We asked for this study because they provide us a checklist. Instead of we filling out that checklist, we're hiring somebody to come up with a study, come up with the figure so we can answer their questions properly. There's no assurance that we're going to get what you're asking for. I really think that your personal desires are out euchering reality, practicality. And I think that MDOT is giving us this broader picture. And when it says serving everybody in the various needs, they're looking not just as the little city, they're looking at the massive population, whoever wishes to use such highway. I think it's not a good use. We're going to be spending money for the cityscapes. Well, here, we need that money for it. We shouldn't be wasting $15,000 on an expenditure for the concept of a road diet when the experts do that. And far as comparing with other cities, it's mentioned there isn't another city exactly like Saline. So I think we need to be really prudent and use some common sense and go beyond as far as what the experts saying, the dreams that they put upon us. We need to work very hard examining who we are, what we really have, what we look like. And like if you're born into a rich family, we have kind of the poor situation that we have here, stretch for money. Let's use our resources wisely and not tax the taxpayers in the community for something that they may not even like or may not even fit properly for them. We need to think beyond our personal needs. If we are property owners downtown or have invested interest downtown, we need to look as far as the citizens, the broader citizen group, not just ourselves, and say the state should serve us. So we need to have that broader picture. We are here as representatives for the taxpayers, the voters, and we need to go beyond what we think for our personal needs and beyond what the literature says. We can dream on some of these things, but some of the stuff doesn't fit Saline. It's not saying we shouldn't change anything. Let's go with what's best for everybody. I think we can make the negative consequences could ruin everything that we had if we go ahead with this. And that could be something's going to hurt for 10, 15, 20 years, whatever you want until this issue comes up again. So I respect the information that the MDOT has given. I respect far as you folks going through the conference call, checking this out further. But I definitely think wasting another $15,000 is not prudent whatsoever.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Ms. Cybo-Koenig?
I want to express my gratitude to Mayor Pro Tem Terhar and to David for expressing so thoughtfully questions and sort of support for the opportunity that we have in front of us. This opportunity is not going to come around again for many, many years. And I think that it is short-sighted to say we are what we are. I think we should always be looking for what we can be. And I support sort of the looking at this more in depth through the study. If the road diet doesn't end up being our answer, hopefully data that's gathered can help us determine other ways that we can improve the walkability of our community. It is a quality of life issue. We wouldn't be here on this bench if we didn't think that we were here for the whole community. The whole community is our concern, not just the downtown, but our downtown is our core. And I want to see us give it the thought that it needs at this point while we have the opportunity.
Very good. Well, I guess I'm last and perhaps least.
Well, I don't think I haven't voted.
Well, please, I thought you were sort of in a camp all unto yourself, but if you have additional comments, we would welcome those.
No, actually, I like walkability in a city, and at one of the prior meetings, I submitted a memo talking about how Jeff Speck supports methods for making areas walkable and looking for walkable areas. What I am not in favor of, I'm in favor also of transparency in government. And I don't think that voting under a discussion item and pretending we're not voting is transparency in government. I think transparency in government would be an agenda item with people coming on the regular agenda, having a regular discussion and voting there rather than doing some pretense here.
Well, it's not pretense, Mr. Burgoyne. That's just laughable. But to the question at hand, not to digress on some bizarre tangent, what I'm looking for, of course, tonight is consensus as to whether or not we as a council will move forward with a traffic study. And as I mentioned earlier, I was on the conference call with DPW Director Fordyce, City Manager Campbell, and City Engineer Rubel. And I left that conference call with, well, similar sentiments I think that are shared by our city engineer, Mr. Rubel. Pretty cynical, pretty skeptical that this would be objectively entertained by our friends and colleagues at MDOT. And I should note that I've had some previous interactions and experience working with Mark Sweeney. I don't always agree with him, but I find him to be a forthright and honest individual who works very hard on behalf of the department and the citizens of the state of Michigan. I also should note that over the course of this past week and weekend, I worked hard on this, or at least I thought I worked hard on this until I heard the comments of Mayor Pro Tem Tahar and Councilmember Rhodes on engaging a variety of citizens and stakeholders to gather their sentiments and position on this issue. And you know, the one thing I should note about MDOT, which this may seem counterintuitive and it seems to surprise some of us, is MDOT is sort of an unmovable object sometimes, and when you come up against unmovable objects, oftentimes they don't move. And so although I maintain a level of cynicism and skepticism as to whether a road diet would be appropriately entertained by the decision makers at MDOT, I do think it is prudent and appropriate at this juncture to move forward with an analysis and a study. And I return to well, to a position that I've articulated on numerous occasions during the course of my almost 2 years as mayor of the city, which is it is incumbent upon leaders, not only elected leaders, but all leaders, not to have knee-jerk, visceral reactions to things, but to gather data, gather analysis, and then make informed decisions and respond accordingly. I think that is fundamental. And so, I appreciate Mr. Gearbaugh's comments tonight that this analysis could prove beneficial in a number of additional ways, not just as it relates to the road diet. But I think it's important that we engage a professional service to really thoroughly review whether this concept is doable and what are the potential benefits and what are the potential ramifications. And of course, there is a component of this, as Mr. Rubel articulated, that engages the public for their positions and feedback as well. So. Again, not always thrilled and excited to spend money and sacrifice precious time, for this type of analysis and review, but I do think it's appropriate, and I would also be in favor of moving forward and doing the study. So it looks like there's a consensus. So what I would recommend, based on Mayor Pro Tem Tahar's comments, is for either you or Jeff to engage with Mark Farrell from Watts. I'll actually see him Wednesday morning at our Watts policy meeting, so maybe I can bend his ear a little bit if he's there. And then I also think it would be beneficial to have our consultant or our point person from URS present at our next meeting to answer any technical specific questions about this contract. Make sense? Okay. Any additional comments from council? No? We all good?
Yep.
Okay.
Additional comment.
Please.
I disagree that transparency is bizarre and laughable. I think these items should be on a regular agenda.
Well, no one made the comment, sir, that transparency was laughable. Your comments were laughable. There's an important distinction there. But you made your point. We're not going to beat this dog to death any further. We're going to move on unless there's anything specific as it relates to this traffic study and road diet. Mr. Gearbox.
I just want to clarify, because the agenda has URS road diet traffic study under discussion, it was noticed to the public.
And they'll have a second opportunity to review it and to speak on it in our subsequent meeting. You're absolutely right. Who is speaking on the Washtenaw County PA 283 issue? Is that you, Mr. Rubel? Please.
I did attend one meeting at the county on behalf of the city and summarized comments I heard at that meeting, subsequently added some action items on the bottom. And apparently the subcommittee established by the Board of Commissioners is moving forward with a proposal to enact a 0.5 millage under PA 283 that would provide monies in 2015 to be distributed between the Road Commission and townships and also to cities and villages within Washtenaw County. So they can actually propose and adopt the millage up to 1 mil without a vote, as established by Act 283, circa 1909 or something. And they used to do it many years ago, and then there was a lapse in recent years. But now they've found a need because there's very little revenue out there to be had to keep road maintenance and reconstruction under control. What they would like and what they've emailed is that they would like the city to give some verbal support to their measure, even though they're going forward in either case. If the program is adopted by the Board of Commissioners, then the city would receive about $204,000 in funds to be managed and spent in ways that we deem appropriate for our road program.
Thank you, Mr. Rubel. Just to clarify, because I think, well, you were at a meeting that I was at with Roy Townsend from the Road Commission, in which he distributed a memo to me, which I think was essentially a copy of the letter and the request that he's sending to the County Ways and Means Committee that's chaired by Commissioner Brayback, in which, they're requesting a 0.5 mil. Just to clarify, they're going to request that only for 1 year, and it would be subject to review and approval the subsequent year. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, it's a year-to-year action.
Okay.
It's not a multi-year thing like a bond or a millage would be established by vote. So it's a year-to-year thing. They're taking a sort of a cautious approach, even though they do have a 2-year program. In case they do 0.5 mil this year and 0.5 mil next year, and they'll see what the reactions are from the townships based on their road program and the projects that they've tabbed for reconstruction during 2015.
And just to clarify too, if it were to be approved by the Board of Commission and based on the allocation metrics, Saline gets slightly more than $200,000. It's not as if they just cut us a check for $200,000. That remains in an account, and then we can draw on it when we have specific projects and requests. Is that correct?
I don't know the exact accounting procedure for it. All I know is that, we do obtain funds at some point. I imagine the details of that might be found out, after they do take any type of approval action. I mean, we'll probably be more involved at that point.
Mr. Gearba.
Just curious, what are they using as their formula for distributing and calculating the figure?
Just the same as us. It's 0.5 mil as assessed to property values. For instance, 0.5 mil would be $50 per property valued at 100,000.
So all of our
That'd
property
be
value within
$50.
our city limits, we would get direct, okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Just above 200,000. Can we confirm, I think another supplemental that would be beneficial to council moving forward, that memo that I received from Roy Townsend, I think you also received it too, which is basically the letter and then a synopsis of the program. Can we confirm whether that's appropriate for public distribution? I believe it is. And then if so, I think providing copies for everyone on council would be beneficial.
Correct. That was a draft form of the
letter that's going to Commissioner Brayback.
communication that was going to the Ways and Means Committee.
Okay.
And so I don't know he never did give us the final request to the Ways and Means Committee.
Can we confirm that? And once there's an official document, I think that would be valuable to disseminate to council. Are there any other questions? Mr. Rhodes?
The City of Ann Arbor Council has an action item on their agenda this week to approve a resolution of support for this 0.5 mil assessment, and so it looks like it's coming to us. But I believe there was also a map included there which showed the roads that they anticipated having been approved, and it appeared to me that those were all roads that were outside of the municipalities, that roads that the county typically takes care of. So if it's accurate that the city of Saline is actually going to receive a portion of that, I'm really pleased to hear that, because that was not my impression from what I saw.
Right.
So again, the road commission is responsible for their roads, and those are the roads they anticipate using, or those are the roads that they anticipating utilizing some of these dollars to repair or reconstruct. How the funds, if they're approved and once they're distributed to the municipalities, how they are used, obviously would be the determination of each of the respective legislative bodies.
If that $500,000 from the township, the county road areas population doesn't seem like it's going to generate enough funds to do all those county roads they were talking about, and that's.
I think the synopsis I was given was it 2015 though and 2016? It was 2 years.
Well, if they proceed with the millage a second year and the second action.
Would allow them to do it in 2016.
If you look at the accounting for the 0.5 mils, countywide it's over $7 million, and about, I'd say 50, just over 50% is for the county. And then because of the city's population and valuation, the city's is almost as much as the whole counties, split up between Ann Arbor, Saline, Chelsea, Dexter, and some villages. So it's almost a 50-50 split on where the money is distributed.
Yeah, that's kind of why I question the formula, how they laid it, if they would give you direct dollar for dollar, because I figured they would use our basis in the cities as being higher and then redistribute those dollars on some kind of formula based on roads or whatever. Right. If they're going to give it direct dollar for dollar, that's not a bad approach.
Okay. We'll make sure that letter and the attached memo, once it's available for public distribution, we'll make sure you get a copy, because I think the information contained within it you would all find beneficial. If there's nothing further from Mr. Rubel, thank you. Appreciate your analysis on this issue and your attendance at those work group meetings. Are there any additional discussion items this evening? No, then we move on to public comment. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments? No? Is there any other business to come before City Council this evening?
I do.
You do?
Yes.
Please.
I would just like to let council know that we have set up set up a parliamentary procedure class for Thursday, November 20th from 6:30 to 9, maybe 9:30. And it's Eleanor Swartz, Coco, and she will be teaching the class. So I will email you and let you know that time to make sure that you have that available. And also, I spoke with Dr. Bender for the town hall facilitating, and he has suggested Friday, Wednesday, December 3rd, 6 to 9 for the town hall meeting, and then also Tuesday, January 6th at 6:30 for a wrap-up meeting. And I'll email all of you on that also. I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Yeah, if you could email both of those things.
Yes.
And then especially the parliamentary procedure thing, we want to make sure that that's disseminated and shared with all of our boards and commissions as well.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Roth?
I distribute to my colleagues a safety suggestion. I thought that could be a part of the road diet, but as discussion went, it didn't quite fit appropriately. But I'd like for you to read such. As we go looking at far as the reconstruction of US 12, I'd like to consider the safety issue of the main intersection at Ann Arbor Street and Michigan Avenue. The consideration of an all-way walk cross signal, then that would be activated by the pedestrian, and then once it goes through the sequence, it'd be allowed a sequence, and that'd be the time for pedestrians to cross. They can go in any direction they like. And along with that, that it would be far as this, that we could add to that far as an audible sound for those who cannot see so good, so you know when they can, a pedestrian can cross. I think that would increase our safety goals. And if we did far as added a hawk signals, and that is as far as the high intensity active crosswalk, when you activate those things and it's actually working, have those red lights along on the intersection. I'm not sure how the signal's going to be marked, but have the hawk signals there that the drivers know that it is a pedestrian thing. So we mark the best we can. The technology is there. If you're talking with MDOT suggesting safety issues, I'd like for these things to be considered. I think it'd be best interest for our pedestrians and make it a more walkable city. And I like to point out that far as I take some of these comments rather personal, that I am not in favor of a walkable city. Yes, I am. I'm not in favor of a walkable city on the back of safety and overall things what a road diet considers. And I'm for our merchants downtown doing some things, but I look at far as the geographic size of what our downtown really is at this point in time. And far as the nature of the business is going on, business we get into, I'd love to see it thriving and being like we can dream. I'm still for these dreams, but I think reality and money needs to be considered in this factor. So that is where I'm coming from. So I appreciate all your interest far as looking to the future, making for the best, but I think we need to get our feet on the ground at some points in times too.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Roth. Is there anything further to come before council this evening? Mr. Burgoyne.
I would like to thank Mr. Roth. I had read through this, and I think looking at the safety issues at those intersections and making it more walkable is very much what we should be looking at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Anything further to come before Saline City Council this evening? Well, we have 2 weeks off, but we'll reconvene on October the 6th with a work meeting to discuss the Maple Heights pilot project. That needs to come back. And then the non-union employment agreements, and that will also involve our Labor Council, Steve Gerard. And then we have a regular meeting at 7:30. That's followed by a regular meeting on October 20th with a 6:30 work meeting to discuss community events, followed by a regular meeting at 7:30. There are no absences this evening, so I would seek a motion to adjourn at 10:13 p.m.
So moved.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, and I'll let Mr. Gearbaugh be the second on that one. There's a lot of you jumping on that one, I understand. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. This meeting's